welcome everybody to All Elite Reviewing, the only show that is reviewing everything All Elite Wrestling, not just Dynamite, but Dark Elevation, BTE, the world of Twitter, and all of the myriad branches coming out and through the forbidden door to Impact, to New Japan Wrestling, to NWA, and beyond. This is your week in All Elite Wrestling. I'm Joshua Starnes.
And I'm Shamik Ghosh.
All right. One of us watches way too much of this stuff, and one of us doesn't. You'll get to figure out which one that is.
Yeah, especially if you count all the ancillary shows like Impact and NJPW, which of course AEW has a lot of ties to and repeatedly show on their flagship shows. So you definitely have that covered more than I do.
I tell you, that is the thing that I have come to resent AEW for the most, is now I have to regularly watch Impact. Yeah, which isn't always all bad. Good Impact is actually very good, but bad Impact is not good. I've heard horrors of the 2000s that I didn't experience, which I'm glad I'm never going to go back to try to find out for myself. I have no interest in that, but some of what I heard still exists in Impact, even if it's better.
And then Zombie Jacks, right? So you didn't have to watch Zombie Jacks.
Well, I didn't have to, but I did. And
yeah, that's on you.
That's all on me. Although I know some people pick that as the worst match they saw this year, still not worse than Alexa Bliss versus Randy Orton. That's the worst.
The 10-foot pole match, right?
Yeah, with Magic, basically. I mean, and that was still the worst thing I've seen this year.
I mean, there's magic. I mean, look at Matt Hardy, the Damascus gimmick, right? That's magic, and that's entertaining as hell. So
it can work if done right. But then he actually wrestles, and he can wrestle. And now he's basically, as we'll get to this, because he had so many promos throughout all the shows this week. I've started to question. I actually wrote in my notes: does Matt Hardy have like a promo minimum that he's guaranteed? Because he had like 2 or 3. I mean, I'm glad they're getting the Hardy family office over, and we've got so many disparate wrestlers who you would not think would necessarily go together under one roof, under that umbrella. And he's basically doing the promos for all of them, which has its good and has its bad. It's good in that he's a lot better at promoing than Blade or Mark Quinn or Isaiah Cassidy. But they've got to learn how to do that if they're ever going to stand on their own 2 feet. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. But there will be a lot of Matt Hardy popping up in this, which is not bad, but Big Money Matt is all over making
right. Like you said, he's on every show. So if we talk about every show, we're definitely going to get to Matt Hardy. So that's not going to be an issue.
Many times. But I guess why don't we start at the beginning? Monday, which is now the day for Dark Elevation, which I had hoped when they announced Dark Elevation, that meant they'd be cutting Dark in half, and instead of 2.5 hour shows on Tuesday, we get like a nice 1 hour show of mid-carders on Monday and a nice 1 hour show of undercarders on Tuesday. That is not what happened. And I think this is the first week that Elevation was actually longer than Dark, because Elevation was 2.5 hours this week. And they tape all of those. They tape Dynamite, Dark, and Dark Elevation all together on the same day. So, I mean, some of it's on Wednesday and some of it's on Thursday, but they basically tape it all together. I cannot imagine how long they were sitting at Daly's place this week. So that was, if you add in Dynamite into it, that's 6+ hours of AEW wrestling this week, and they haven't even added in the second show yet.
Right, and that's just in time for our debut, right?
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Exactly. Starting just the time that, which the big news this week, AEW Rampage is coming August 13th, Friday the 13th, because it's a Friday show this summer. The week before AEW actually finally makes its Houston live showing on August 18th. So, and they still haven't entirely explained what the taping schedule is going to be, whether they're going to be taping Rampages and Dynamites on different nights, or they're going to be taping them together. So we may be getting a 3-hour show, the second ever 3-hour live show, when they have that the live Houston Dynamite on Wednesday, August the 18th, which you and I both have tickets for. So you might have to gird your loins that's going to be a nice long show. It's going to be like going to a Raw where they record 3 hours plus main event.
Or, like I'm not a baseball guy, but isn't it like basically going to go see the pitchers do batting practice and then everything before the actual game? Like when you see dark matches before the show and everything like that. So I kind of think of it like that.
Shows, because they're saying both Dynamite and Rampage are going to be A shows where it's going to be angles and major rest. Like you've had that. I mean, you've had 3 hours of Dynamite in the pre-pandemic era where they had a dark match before and 2 dark matches after. So you had extra wrestling, but this isn't even going to be that. You'll have 2 hour, live because they have to stop for the commercial breaks. You'll have 2 hours of Dynamite with main event, network quality TV matches and angles and everything, and then a slight break, and then you got to prepare yourself for an hour of Rampage plus any dark matches that they may do. And they still haven't said what the taping schedule for Dark and Dark Elevation is going to be like when they go on the road. I have to assume / hope, not to say that I don't enjoy my AEW, but that when they go on the road, they will no longer physically be able to do these
8 hours
sessions and 8 hours.
That's what I was going to ask you. Is like, have you heard anything of it being like, basically 8 hours of taping in each city?
No,
that's a lot of wrestling.
There's no way. There's no way they can do it the way there are only 2 options. They either will have to cut it in half, and both of those will become much smaller, or those will stay at like Daly's Place, and they'll do like a once a week taping at Daly's Place for anybody who's not on the main, who's not traveling with the main show. But I don't think they know, because they have released no details about how that's going to work. So I guess,
and because I can't even tell. I can't even tell like a hierarchy of like the shows. Like, like usually you can say like there's a rung on the ladder. Like when you look at Dark, you look at Elevation, the matches, they seem like sometimes they have equally good matches on their shows.
Well, there definitely is a hierarchy. In fact, I've been thinking about this as a bit that we may do earlier. I was thinking about it while watching this week, of creating the AEW depth chart, because there is one you can tell, and it's not just based on wins and losses, but who loses to who. You can signal who is exactly where in the, who are they likely to beat, who are they likely not to beat. So you can tell when there's an upset, like there was on Elevation this week. But one thing you can definitely tell, even just cursorily seeing that, there is a hierarchy where Dark, even though it comes on Tuesday and not Monday, is the undercard, and is probably, except for like the main event or maybe the co-main event, is much shorter, a lot of much shorter matches, primarily against enhancement talent. Oh, that's a WWE phrase, so we're not going to call it that. Primarily against jobbers. There's nothing wrong with being a jobber. Everybody, the industry needs it, but primarily against jobbers that don't last particularly long, and maybe 1 or 2 among the higher level. And then whereas Elevation is much more the mid-card level. You do have some jobbers, but for the most part, you have mid-carders where you either have against jobbers, but longer matches, because the one thing in general for Elevation, everybody's getting longer matches. They're getting like a good 15 minutes, but you've also got a lot more mid-card versus mid-card. You've got real main events with either mid-carders or even some lower upper carders, like we had this week with Brian Cage and Matt Sydal. And that was a match that could easily have been on Dynamite. It just wasn't. And which, sometimes is true of Dark, but not all the time. And because I think Dark this week was main evented by Brian Pillman and Luther. That's not something you're going to see on Dynamite. Right.
I was kind of surprised. I think actually on Dark wasn't Angelico was like the other main event, right? Or the match right before. And to me, being a huge Angelico mark, I'm like, that to me was the main event. So everything after that was just like, like this surplus. It basically just, it was unnecessary after that.
Well, after you had the Navarro death roll, what could possibly live up to that? But also, and the dance, and this time he danced out with a hat. I think we're getting ahead of ourselves. But you are seeing,
even like the ball cup and everything. Like he's got the moves down. Like I would buy Molly from that guy in a second. I'm just saying.
There is also definitely, for better or for worse, there's the group that are consistently on both of these. It rotates. Like some guys who come in and off of Dynamite but are consistently on these, like your Joey Janela's and your Sonny Kisses. But I've seen them much more so on Dark, bringing in some of the upper carders. We've had John Moxley on Elevation a few times now.
Right. Yes. Yeah.
Sent together, kind of giving them some ring time as a tag team to kind of get that act together.
I mean, as opposed to like MJF, who you barely see wrestle on Dynamite, even like,
Exactly.
let alone go to any of the other shows.
He's there to talk. I mean, he's there to wrestle when he needs to, but he's not there to wrestle. He's there.
I mean, I get that they're protecting him, but sometimes it's like, come on, you want to see your guy wrestle, right? I mean, that's what we watch. It's called wrestling. It's not called talking.
And he's good at wrestling. I know people might forget that he actually had the first ever match on Dynamite, on live Dynamite TV. It was his match. He had a match with Brandon Cutler, and they were like the first people ever to go out there and have a match. Not counting the initial pay-per-views, but
yeah, no, he was like a face or or whatever.
Yeah, it's like a city face, but he doesn't really. They mainly keep him out to I don't know if that's to protect him from losses or protect him from injury, because they want him out there talking as much as possible. And he does have some issues with his elbow. He has had to miss time just with the handful of matches that he's had. But it's been like that it was like that when he was in MLW too. He wrestled here and there, but mostly he was there to talk, and he was generally in a group with other wrestlers that he was as good as, but that they carried the wrestling side of it. He carried the talking and drew the heat, which is fine. He's like somewhere, he's not a manager because he still wrestles, but he's somewhere in like this player coach.
But he's a good wrestler. That's what I'm saying. Like, it's not like Eddie Kingston, because Eddie Kingston, even though I love Eddie, and especially this tag team with Mox, oh my gosh, I love this tag team. But when you see Eddie wrestling singles, you're kind of like, you're not bad at it, but this isn't like on your skills. This isn't exactly the top thing. But MJF, like in the ring, he can go, and so that's why you want to see him, show that off. Like, remember the match he had with Jungle Boy? That was a fantastic match. Yeah. So I mean, and of course, Jungle Boy makes that match good too. But the fact is, and that's why when we talk about the undercard shows, and that's why you bring up someone like Moxley. It's like, even DVD, or I'll call her DVB DMD, Dr. Britt Baker. Whenever she went on that little rampage where she went up there, like one of the only times to me the ranking kind of made sense at AEW, where it's like, oh, okay, they're actually doing it as a storyline, and although on the other hand, you're like, okay, this is an obvious push, like it's like, there's no suspense, and like she's obviously going to get a title shot at this rate. Right. But I mean, she did do the work. She went on every single show and did the work, and she put in the work, and that's why even like a lot of people like her now, because they saw that she put in the work. And especially after that Thunder Rosa match too. Yeah. But with MJF, and this is the one thing. It's like, I love the guy so much, but I just want to see him wrestle more. Yeah. And I know you said before that, it's like the injury protection thing, makes a lot of sense, especially when you have someone like, say, like Ray Fenix, who has a habit of getting injured like all the damn time.
Yeah, so you don't want to happen to do himself bodily out of the ring as far and as fast as he can. And maybe there will be something for him to land on, and maybe there won't.
Yeah, we'll see. Maybe he'll get a bunch of cushions like Jericho. Maybe he won't. We'll see. But yeah. So that's the only thing I was going to say about MJF is that, like this, it'd be nice to see him wrestle more, but I get why they're protecting him. But maybe after with this, him being the head of the Pinnacle, he'll have to wrestle more. I mean, he's been on TV at least almost every week now.
Yeah. I mean, they always have him on TV. It's just mainly, and there's a couple that are like that, and we don't see them on. You can definitely start to see the hierarchy of who moved up from like kind of mid card from the original Double or Nothing, because you don't ever see Darby Allin or rarely see Darby Allin on Dark or Elevation. He is there for TV because he moves numbers on TV, and they want him on TV. And the same for MJF. He's like the opposite of MJF because he's on TV not to talk, just to throw himself bodily around the ring, but he moves numbers. Does that.
Or vignettes, those weird moody like video vignettes that he does with his like film school degree or whatever in Washington.
Yeah. It's very interesting to see like the kind of where are they now, because you had this group of maybe 3 or 4 or 5 guys who were in that mid-card slot when AEW started. It was like MJF and Jungle Boy, Darby Allin, Joey Janela, and Jimmy Havoc. In fact, they tended to be in like the first like 4 or 5 big things. And they had a lot of group tags against each other, and you kind of see the guys who are either gone or still in the mid-card versus guys like Darby Allin and MJF who have directly elevated up into the main event slot, and everyone's pretty sure Jungle Boy is going to do the same. They just haven't, because they've been spending all that time on Darby Allin. They can only really do one at a time.
That was one thing I was going to bring up actually today, because even actually when I look at my elevation notes, I'm looking at the first match was actually Adrian Alanis versus Jungle Boy, and it's one of those things where, when is that Jungle Boy push going to happen? Because he's ready for it. I mean, at least athletically, he's definitely ready for it. And even promos he just did a promo on Dark, I think, just this week. And even though I was like, man, you're starting to sound a lot like your dad. But did you notice that too?
I did. Did it more Southern accent, but yeah.
Yeah, I was like, huh? And then because he doesn't usually talk that much, which is good. That I think they're trying to, I guess, prepare him, to get a push, just like
That's
they put a
probably
logo in the commentary to get a push before his push.
Probably like the only weak thing in his game, because a lot of his gimmick has been that he doesn't talk. He's the jungle boy from out of the jungle, learning these strange ways of man. So he didn't, but if he's going to be like pushed as a singles wrestler,
so the dinosaur talks more than he does.
And but they haven't really done that, and he's going into the battle royal, which isn't like a small thing. Like the casino battle royal means a lot more in AEW than battle royals, and we've been kind of trained that outside of the Royal Rumble, the battle royals don't mean anything, and even in the Royal Rumble, it only means something for a couple of guys. But the casino battle royal generally means it. Like the people who've won them have gotten the two people who've won the casino battle royale are Adam Page and Brian Cage, who are not like wrestling against each other at have gotten consistent pushes since then, and they rarely lose. And when one of them does lose, like in the the first Adam Page versus Brian Cage, it is really surprising to a lot of people that one of them loses. So it's person and Jungle Boy is if you look at the people they've announced for it, Jungle Boy is someone that at this point you would expect to be either a winner, or I think he's actually been in the last 2 or last 3 of all the last battle royals he's been in, because he's someone who's in that main event slot, and you expect him to win or come out near the top, and one of these days he's going to win one, and that would be like the start of his. I kind of thought when he was doing the program against FTR that was going to be the start of his push, but it's the one thing that you can really criticize, and I think we're gonna have to like dive into it because we have so many matches to go over, but because they only have 2 hours of TV, a lot of stuff is, there's some stuff that's regular that they're hyper focused on, like MJF and Darby Allin, in the main event stuff with Moxley, Orange Cassidy, and even Orange Cassidy had he's going into a main event of a pay-per-view, but even he had some start and stop because he had like a lot of go over the summer, and then it kind of stopped while they focused on the Omega and Moxley stuff, and now it started back up again. But there's only so much time, so hopefully once Rampage starts, that's also something where you can start to see regular pushes for guys like Jungle Boy, who the only reason they haven't done it, I have to expect, is because they just don't have time, because they've got to have time for Britt Baker and Thunder Rosa and Omega and Moxley and Cody and all of that stuff.
I mean, they could just take the side L's off TV, then that frees up so much time for everybody else who deserves a shot.
And I don't want to jump ahead into Dynamite, and I know how you feel about them. The side L's had 2 of the better matches I saw out of all of these.
Fuck the side L's. That's how I feel. Fuck them. Anyways, let's go. So, okay. So the next match was Aaron Solo versus Justin Rhodes, which I guess is this whole QT Factory versus Nightmare Family thing, which QT bores the shit out of me, to tell you. This is the most interesting he's ever been. Yeah. But it's still
even more so.
Bowling shirts? How is that? How's that intimidating?
I know, with the bowling shirt, even more so than when Bunny was robbing all of his money and he was getting hair plugs. And
where was heel QT then?
I know. The thing that I thought was funny though, and to jump forward to Dynamite, is that QT is the one getting all of the heat. Like they're supposed to be working this to get to push forward all the new guys like Nick Camarado and especially Anthony Ogogo, who's having his big coming out. But it's like QT sucks is what everybody is chanting.
Well, I mean, he sucks. So, I mean, he's a very big suck magnet for that type of thing.
It'll be interesting to see if Aaron gets to. It's interesting to see the guys who we've been talking about this, that in a lot of cases, Elevation and Dark are about showcasing new wrestlers, and a lot of them are just guys who are passing through, but some of them guys who've been here for an hour, they're going to be here for a year, losing matches, and then are finally going to get their push. And like Aaron Solo has been one of those, because he's been on Dark for about a year now, mainly as enhancement talent, but now they put him with a faction, and he's going to, he's not going to beat a Dustin Rhodes, so he's going to lose that one right away. But he's getting longer, more competitive matches, and some people down lower on the card, he's going to get a chance to start beating and start get a couple of wins, until at some point he shows up on Dynamite as more than just an angle for Anthony Ogogo.
Well, I was just actually speaking on even the Aaron Solo and Dustin Rhodes match. I actually was expecting Solo to go over. I was surprised that Rhodes did, because I thought Rhodes is basically there to put other people over, especially if you have a new faction that you want people to take seriously. Unless they're just really just planting the seeds for a really long Nightmare Family like factory feud.
Some of it, I think some of it, but I don't think they would waste that on Elevation. I think if they were going to do that, it would be on TV, but it's not.
Oh, so people could see it. Okay.
Yeah. And it seems like they're built, because Dustin's been coming out with that bull rope for quite a while now. So it feels like they're building up to a bull rope match. And if he's going to put somebody over, it's going to be something like that. But we'll see. It feels like it's going to be something like Dustin versus QT, since QT was his tag team partner. But and all of this other stuff is just sort of building it, and which is one of the things I like. I know people complain and fuss about two things. They complain and fuss about the rankings, which I actually like the rankings, because they treat them.
I like the concept.
They treat them.
I don't think the execution is there all the time.
I think it is, but I think you just have to. Some of it is seeing it how they see it, because I see it as two ways. Number one is, to a certain extent, the rankings don't matter until you're in the top two. So then they do matter, and it tells you who is really getting a push and who's getting ready to get either like a TV main event or a pay-per-view main event, and everything else is just. But they treat it like a shoot when they need to, and so it's there. And the rest of it, they use it to add like extra flavor. It's like not too long ago, there was a match, about a month or so ago, there was a Max Caster, Adam Page match. And they mentioned in passing that like Adam Page was ranked number 2 and Max Caster was ranked number 3. And I heard lots of people complain and fuss like, how on earth did Max Caster rank number 3? If they were going to make him rank number 3, why weren't they doing that on TV? Like, well, they weren't going to make him rank number 3 because it worked out that way. His tag team partner got hurt, so they put him on Dark to keep getting screen time, and so he racked up a lot of wins, but a lot of that was about getting ring time so he could stay fresh while Anthony Bowens was out. And then Pac, who was number 3, who was getting pushed towards this pay-per-view main event, got hurt, and he was out of action, so he got dropped out of the top 5. So suddenly Max Caster is the next guy. So they're like, well, it's a shoot. He has the next most wins. This is not the position we were aiming for. It's just the position that we're in. So he's number 3. He is not going to go over Adam Page, because this is, plug the AEW depth chart. In the AEW depth chart, he is still below Adam Page.
I mean, I was so surprised when Brian Cage beat Adam Page.
That's supposed to be surprising. That's one of those things where he is. They were that's, if you really look at it, they were probably like 50-50, and it could have been either one, but the way they've been pushing Adam Page, you would expect him to go over, which is, it seems clear in hindsight, they were pushing him that way so that it would be a surprise when he lost. And they've done that before, because they did that with him and Pac back in 2019 as well, heading into a pay-per-view match with him and Pac. But, it was like, when it came time for him and Max Caster to have that, they were always going to have that single match, and he was always going to go over. Just when it got time to do it, just because of a lot of events they didn't plan for that just happened, Max Caster was number 3. So like, all right, this is not like suddenly some planned long-term angle we were working on, but it adds some extra sauce. We can add some extra sauce by saying this guy's number 3 and this guy's number 2. And, look at that. Wins and losses do matter, and wins and losses do matter. And a lot of people take that to complain about Dark and Dark Elevation, be like, I shouldn't have to watch these shows.
I hear that a lot. There's no credibility with the internet shows with a lot of wrestling community right now.
You know what? I
don't agree with that, but that's how a lot of them feel.
You don't have to, and it sounds to me like a lot of stuff that I hear from like family and friends who complain about Marvel movies, who will be like, all I want to see are the big Avengers movies. I shouldn't have to watch fucking Ant-Man in order to understand the Avengers. I can't. And I'm like, well, nobody's going to make you. You just, you can just watch the stuff you want to watch. And you may not know what's going on if you choose to only watch X% of it. And at a certain point, that is on you. You have made that choice, only watch some small percent of it. And so you may be lost. And you just have to prepare for that. There's no need, the company doesn't have a responsibility to spoon feed this stuff to you and whatnot. I personally like the fact that if you watch all of it, you get a lot more out of it. and it's worth, you know, compared to, again, to compare it to like Marvel, when you had like the Marvel ABC TV shows that didn't matter about anything, they were off on their own because
Yeah, their
no,
continuity is all weird. Yeah.
and so, you know, you felt like, well, what am I doing wasting my time with this stuff? Because it's not going to matter at all. To a certain extent, stuff that happened, we're going to talk about it because they're working angles on Elevation. They have done things where they have worked an angle across a week from Elevation to Dark to Dynamite. And you can just watch Dynamite and it's fine. But if you watch all of it, you get a lot more out of it.
Right. Yeah. At least I know some new wrestling fans that, you know, basically started only watching wrestling because of AEW, and they at least, you know, will watch the internet stuff along with the show. It's mostly, I think, the diehards, like the people who've been watching forever, who are like, "Grr, have to go to the internet like to watch something that's stupid." But I'm like, pretty sure you watch a ton of porn on the internet. Just substitute it for wrestling once in a while, and you know, zip up your pants. That's all you gotta do.
I mean, porn and wrestling, what's the difference?
Yeah. So speaking of Rob Van Dam, no kidding. Hall of Famer Rob Van Dam right now.
About people covered in oil wearing only their underwear, but same difference. Same difference.
All right, so let's see if there's anything else on Elevation that I thought was really worth mentioning. Oh yeah, Mox and Andy, of course, love the tag team. And then even they're doing like they fought. I don't like Danny Limelight too much, and I don't know who the fuck Royce Isaacs is, but that's who they fought.
Here, I will fill you. Number one, Danny Limelight is great. You gotta give, because and you need to be prepared for it, because especially now that he has had now that he's a Southern California wrestler, he wrestles a lot of stuff. He's on New Japan Strong a lot. Every so often he's on NWA Power. But the fact that he's done a main event with Moxley on Dark, and he has had his own. He's been on Dark on Elevation a bunch. He's had a match with Kenny Omega. He's had a match on Dynamite.
In an interview with Big Show, like they sit down vignette.
So
right.
This is all the stuff they do when they're getting ready to bring somebody in and have them be like, so, you know, don't be surprised when he shows up on Dynamite or Rampage, more likely like Rampage on a regular basis. But he is great on New Japan Strong. Don't sleep on Daniel Limelight. He is a great ring wrestler.
I think it's a name, and also the Spider-Man tattoo on the chest, and like him calling himself the radioactive something. And what's his gimmick? Like he says that I'm the radioactive something. I just tuned out after he said radioactive.
Got like two gimmicks because he's like radioactive, Big Poppy, and the radioactive. But he's also got his gimmick,
nothing for me,
which doesn't fit like the way he moves. But he's got his gimmick as being a Marine drill sergeant because he was a Marine drill sergeant.
Oh. No one has any type of army gimmick on
I know.
you at all. Aren't there like 5 jobbers that have like that gimmick?
Yes. Yeah, it's just that's like his background. Like that was what his whole conversation with Big Show was about. And so they're like mix and match, but it's okay. You know, he's got the moves. He may not necessarily have the character, but in AEW, the moves count for a lot. Royce Isaacs was a tag team wrestler from NWA. He was part of like their major faction, and which is where Kingston was. In fact, he was feuding with Kingston at the time that the pandemic hit, and along with like 5 guys left and either went to WWE. Ricky Starks and Eddie Kingston both left NWA and came over here. He came over several months later, but obviously he's slotted further down the card. Eli Drake left and went to WWE. James Storm left and went back to Impact. So basically they have 3 things left at NWA. They have Nick Aldis, who's great, who's the world champion, who is fantastic. And they've tried a couple times to get him to AEW, but they just won't offer him enough money, and he likes NWA. They've got Thunder Rosa, who everyone is pretty sure is going to come to AEW full time whenever her contract is up.
He basically is already.
Yeah. And you've got Camille, who will probably be their next women's champion, who's really good. She needs to be seasoned, but she's got a good look and a good character. She's just a big.
What about Serena Deeb though? She's a
Serena Deeb is an AEW. It's really weird. She's an AEW wrestler that they put the NWA title on.
Oh, so she's not on the NWA roster?
No, she's on the AEW roster.
Oh, I don't know how to get it. They don't ever explain that. So yeah,
because she had her problem with her knee. As far as I know, she has only wrestled 2 matches ever in NWA. Once where she beat Thunder Rosa, and once on one of their pay-per-views. And then she's been out the whole rest of the time. She's wrestled
right. Who's injured?
on Dynamite than she has on actually NWA. So
Yeah, that's true.
there's an NWA pay-per-view coming up in June that I would assume she's going to defend the women's championship match at, and it's got a big match that means something for AEW because Thunder Rosa and Camille are going to have a number one contenders match. And part one of the stipulations was that if Thunder Rosa loses, she cannot ever wrestle for any other company except the NWA ever again.
Right.
Which tells me just the way that they've used her and the fact that they're still building up the Thunder Rosa Britt Baker feud. That tells me that she's probably going to win, and she's probably still going to be on AEW. But who knows? Surprises happen. That could be a way to build in having Britt Baker go to Power every so often. Who knows? Who knows what they're going to do?
Yeah, which I'm sure would be great for Power's ratings. I mean, having Britt Baker on there. I mean, also it's almost a foregone conclusion. And Britt Baker's going to win the title, right? At Double or Nothing. Right?
It would be. They would have to have.
I mean, she deserves it. I mean, let's be honest.
Unbelievable booking idea in mind not to do it because it's been a year, which is a long time. Britt Baker gotten over the, I was thinking about this. There's a lot of talk, and we can talk about it as we look through some of the stuff that's happening on Elevation, like with Layla Hirsch, who's she's one of those dark finds that has gone from dark to suddenly being really coming through and being on the main show and being a big part of the women's roster. It feels like Kylan King, who still will occasionally job to some of the, I don't know why they had her lose to Bunny. That doesn't make any sense to me, but who is, they've got her they've kind of got her in a faction with Red Velvet. Red Velvet came up entirely through the dark thing. I mean, she got a lot of luck taking over Brandy's spot in that Shaq match, but she has made the most of it. She had a really good match this week that we'll talk about, but she and Swole and Kylan King are building a faction together on dark. It's only been on dark, but it seems like a good way, something good that they could bring to one of the main TV shows especially once they have that extra hour. So I would expect to see more Kylan King. She's kind of moved up into the mid card. I expect to see her. So they're building up like a decent women's division. Now they have Serena Deeb, who's great, and Thunder Rosa, who's pretty much a permanent member of the faction of the roster now, even though she's not technically signed, and Britt Baker and Sheeta. And but I was thinking about as good as all of them are, and you get regular good match, whereas it used to be kind of hit and miss. And there are some who've been called hit and miss. I think like Penelope Ford should probably get to wrestle more than she does because her matches are, she's had some bad matches, but she's had a lot of good matches, and she just doesn't get a lot of TV time because she's always been connected to someone else, and she hasn't gotten like a lot of time as a character. And they could use some more of that while they're trying to build out the women's division. But even then, you've got some good work. You are more likely to get a good women's match. Jade Cargill is really turning into something. Sure,
oh yeah, big improvement
out of her. So you are more like, it used to be real hit and miss with the women's. You never knew exactly what you were going to get with the women's match on AEW, and some of the ideas they had were really wonky, especially at the beginning. But they've really kind of locked it in. And you still get weird stuff. You'll still get your Maki Itos and your Ryo Mizunami's, whose matches I like, but it's very strange for Americans.
Maki Ito, bad thing.
But you've got but more likely than not, you're going to get a really good match out of your women's match now. But even with all of that, there are really only two women wrestlers who are complete packages, who are not just they're going to give you a good match in the ring, but they're also going to promo well. They've got their gimmick completely figured out, and not only can they talk, but they can talk in line with their gimmick and push a match, and that's Britt Baker and Thunder Rosa. And all the women wrestlers have maybe one of those things, but they don't have like Red Velvet's. It's getting a lot better in the ring. Serena Deeb is great in the ring, but I don't know who they are, and I don't know why. I like watching their matches, but I don't necessarily know why I would root for them in a feud.
Yeah, why do you care? What's your emotional investment into the match? And that means a lot in wrestling.
Right. If somebody had to ask me who's Britt Baker? Well, she's an evil wrestling dentist. Like, who's Thunder Rosa? She is a really spitfire MMA wrestler from the graveyards of Tijuana. And if somebody asked me who's Serena Deeb, I don't know. She's a really good wrestler.
That actually brings you up to a little point I'm going to make about Christian later, but I want to actually get to the show before we do anything else like that. I was going to say, because there's some certain things that you don't really see on the Dynamite show which is one faction that doesn't make this head too much on there, but I like them a lot. It's pretty pictures. Pretty Peter Avalon's the Wingmen.
Like faction. You
Yeah,
know what?
when JD Drake first came on, I was like, I don't really understand what's going on. I mean, this guy, like, he looks like a little country bumpkin, like a dude who will fix your pickup truck, that type of guy. Like I guess like the Otis and Ray type of look. But then when they did the whole it just really showed when they did the whole like the fancy shirt shit and like he's wearing the boots outside the jeans. I'm like, all right, I get it. I get why this is funny now. Like this is actually kind of funny. And the fact that like when Bonani was like, I don't understand why this guy's in our group and like doing that type of thing. And I think it's pretty good. But then I've always been a Peter Avalon fan. Yeah. I mean, for a librarian, he's done very well.
Well, now he's not a librarian anymore. But if you say out loud, like there's a faction with Peter Avalon and Ryan Nimitz and Cesar Bononi and JD Drake, you're like, well, is that they pulled their name out of the hat faction?
Exactly.
But like within the thing, it works. The idea of starting with it's kind of like a lot of stuff with Max Cat, because I've noticed like a lot of Max casters this week notwithstanding, a lot of his best raps are the ones they do on Dark, where they don't have to worry about standards and practices. So
I mean the oral sessions.
Yeah, pretty well. They had one a couple. They had this one this week about spitting. They've had one a couple of times. He did his booty butt one last week that people were dying about, that they absolutely would not be able to.
That's so usually Bowens is like his censor, and he comes up and it's like,
and I want to talk about that too, because it was something like weird, because they had a great anti-Moxley, right? They have in general, whenever they're going to have a big match on Dynamite, they always do a really great music video that you only get to see on Dark, but they're great. And they had one this time that I would have said they should have put it on.
The prison one, the one they're in prison and they're making fun of Eddie and they're dressed like Eddie. That was really funny.
Moxley jumpsuit, just walking around punching walls for no reason. It was great. It was if it hadn't been for how good his ring entry. Max Caster, I mean, and we're talking about this on a show that has Britt Baker and MJF. Max Caster may be their best heel. He's like undercover. He is going to steal.
I think like I told you when he first started, I was like, okay, John Cena did this gimmick a long time ago.
No, but
honestly, like he's a better rapper than John Cena.
He is
that's one of the things. Like now I'm like, the Acclaim, in the same. I'm like, wow, like I catch myself seeing that like a lot. So I'm like, all right, they're growing on me. And plus, they can go in the ring. Bowens is really good in the ring.
Yeah, they're both really good. They can both go. I will say they're actually probably better wrestlers than John Cena. Caster's better, but Caster uses it in the way it should be, because Cena, for and different people have different opinions on this, but he had to be a babyface his whole career, and that gimmick is really, really annoying on a babyface. Like I could never see Max Caster as a babyface, but as a heel, as a really annoying heel, it is perfect. That is the perfect gimmick for an annoying heel, and he does it really well.
That's true. I mean, if you think about it, he's just a spiritual successor to Heidenreich when he used to come out with the pose. So that's the same.
I don't think I would have come up with that, but.
One of my favorite punchline wrestlers to ever use on any wrestling conversation. Like anytime I put a GIF, it's like a GIF of Heidenreich and Michael Cole. Like that whole thing.
I will say.
Okay, so.
Well, there's one thing we have to point out, because it's going to come up on Dynamite, is they had to be, and we're talking about angles that go from show to show to show. There's been an ongoing angle about Jade Cargill looking for a manager, and this shows the show where MJF's ex-lawyer Mark something or other,
Stargill or something like that,
something like that, showed up to offer him his card and services as her manager, and that will pop back up in Dynamite. So you got to watch Elevation stuff. Stuff actually starts here, and you had some the setup for the Hikaru Shida Rebel match was in this week's Elevation, where it started out as a Chris Statlander promo that turned into a Britt Baker promo that turned into Shida challenging Britt Baker and getting Rebel instead. And you had what I thought was a really good promo from QT and Anthony Ogogo. And they're getting better and better at selling the governor, as which
That's all you, man.
I'm only going to call him that just because it annoys you, as a real threat.
I mean, thank God he's not commentating because he's not like, oh, you know, and then first of all, he didn't say fucking anything for like half the show, and then they'd have to throw it to him, and then he'd be like, yeah, all right, that was a move. I've seen wrestling, and like tell me, oh, it's his whole contribution, or making some terrible joke that was force fed to him.
I miss Anthony Ogogo as a commentator. I was kind of hoping he would come on as a baby face, but he's making a really good heel, and we'll talk about that in Dynamite because he's getting.
Yeah, of course. I mean, first of all, like, let's just go ahead and just get into Dynamite. We talked about the Christian versus Matt Sydal match that kicks things off, which was a good match.
One thing we just see before, I know we're running a lot of time and we're skipping over Dark entirely, but is that because we're talking about all of these Matt Hardy promos, and because they're still pushing the Hardy family office against the Dark Order, but almost all of that was on Dark this week. There were like 3 different Hardy family office versus the Dark Order matches, including Private Party versus Alex Reynolds in 5, which was my second favorite match in all of Dark between both shows this week. It was really good. You don't always get 5 play. Alan Angels plays a goof character a lot, and Alex Reynolds plays a goof character a lot, so you don't always get to see how well they can go. But they went really hard, and it was really good. And you also got our only Pentagon Jr. match this week was on Elevate. There was no Ray Phoenix on any of the shows this week, and the only Pentagon was on Dark Elevation, where he fought Robo, which had my favorite line that wasn't on anything all week because nobody did any promos, but Alex Abrahantes is now tweeting for Pentagon, and he had a great tweet where he put out that Pentagon says his favorite movie is RoboCop, but he hates Robo and is going to beat him. And I laughed very hard at that.
I like Alex Abrahantes. He's like kind of like the schoolyard Billy who always comes out and is like, oh man, you should hear what this guy said about you. You know what he said? He said you suck and your face smells. Like that's the type of guy he is. And it's actually like a good deal thing to do. Where you want to kick the shit out of him, so that's good, you know?
Well, that's one of the things that AEW does really well that we've gotten out of the habit of getting in wrestling. If like if something they came across by accident, and as soon as they saw, they're like, oh no, this, they had him for one segment as Phoenix's translator for a totally different setup, because he has a full-time job as their Spanish announcer, and they were like, oh, this works, let's do this again, and they did it one more again, like, oh, this really works, and next thing you know, he's coming out to the ring and he's yammering at people around the ring and getting involved in matches, and it's great. He is more detestable than any of their heel managers right now.
Yeah, I mean, it's actually because when I watch BTE, Beyond the Elite sometimes, or actually pretty much a lot. And but his skits, I never was a huge fan of them on there.
They were okay.
I always wanted to laugh more at them than I did. I was like, oh, like, is this funny? Like, I couldn't tell. That's why I like what he's doing on Dynamite now, or I guess just in all the shows really, where he's their manager, but not Pac's manager. So right. I don't know how that still works out, but
it's a weird dynamic, but we just go with the flow.
Yeah, but I mean, he definitely adds something to their act, so that's the thing. Like, and he doesn't distract. He's not bad at doing that. He's good at getting his ass kicked too, so that's good.
And he looks like someone.
He's no Don Callis, but he's still, he's who is. Right?
Not everybody can be Don Callis, and we're diving into Dynamite now. So I definitely got some stuff I want to say about Don Callis, who is one of the, who's turning into like one of the all-time great heel managers of all time. But Christian Cage and Matt Sydal, your other favorite wrestler in AEW. But I thought they had a great match.
Oh, I was gonna say, do you want to get a Dynamite? Because you're right, like, there is a lot of Dark that we just kind of skipped over. Unless there's something else on Dark, or do you want to skip?
There's like one or two other things, but I'm going to mention them when we talk about Dynamite. I think we.
Okay. So let's start with Christian Cage and Sydal, or my favorite, Matt Sydal, like for not appropriating any type of Indian culture or Hindu culture at all. Yeah, that guy's so awesome. But so what were your thoughts about the Christian Cage and Matt Sydal? What were you gonna say?
I thought it was decent. I thought it was a good TV match. I know a lot of people liked it a lot more than I do. It seems like Christian Cage is still, he doesn't have ring rust, but you can tell he hasn't been wrestling for a long time, and time has caught up with him, and he is in his mid-40s, so he's still getting back into that blow. We haven't seen him have a blowaway match. He hasn't been in a position to have a blowaway main event match. I suspect if he was put in that position, he would have a really good one, especially if he's with one of the top guys. But I thought this was fine. It ran a little long. It helped a lot that he was in there with Seidel, who has been able to have really good singles and tag matches with just about everybody. Like one thing he has shown, like he can have good matches with guys smaller than him, the same size as him, bigger than him, and it doesn't matter. Like he's had great matches with Kenny Omega. He had a great match with Brian Cage, and it doesn't matter. He can have so. And like Christian Cage isn't somebody he's going to have to walk through a match on. And together, I thought, it probably went just a little bit long, and then it had a bunch of schmoz at the end because they got so little time and so many people. They have to have a schmoz at the end of every match and throw a lot of angles. But I really did like when Hangman handed his beer to Ricky Starks. I thought that was great.
Yeah, that was good. The only thing about Christian, and I also, because I try to think about it, I mean, I like Christian a lot from when, especially from, like when he was, ever since he did the Peep Show stuff, like back in the day, which I was like Christian as a heel, and he came out and actually like did a really good job as a smarmy heel, right? But when he, like I mentioned, I have friends that, just got into wrestling basically. When they see Christian, especially because they made such a big deal about him coming over.
Right.
And I feel like it hasn't exactly delivered yet. And it's like I feel his gimmick right now, other than the outwork everyone, which isn't really a gimmick, right? His gimmick is I'm Christian. Right. And for people who don't know who Christian is, why should they care? You know, at least when Sting came out, like even like my friends that didn't know Sting, the whole thing, the presence, him coming out with the bat being
Sting comes across
kind of made sense.
Sting comes across like a star. Even if you don't know who he is, he's a big star for some kind of big reason. And Christian just comes across as another wrestler.
Exactly.
I don't know why we're making a big deal out of him.
Right, and so that's the only thing, and I like his work, and I want to see where they do what they do with this Team Taz program, because I love Team Taz. I think every single one of those people I think is great. Although Hook, I don't know, the jury's still out. But with them, that's what I want to know. Like, I guess we'll see a Double or Nothing where the program advances, but it's just that you want to see him do more, because
that's one of those things that feels like some of it's bad luck, because it seems like he was going to have a program with Ricky Starks, and Ricky Starks broke his neck and is out.
That's right.
And he's just going to be coming. And I like the fact that at least they have him come out and keep talking so he can stay on TV, because what's really weird, the first time I saw Ricky Starks is on NWA, where he was a face, he was a baby face, and watching him, and his act now isn't that much different from then, and watching him now, I'm like, how on earth was he ever able to get over as a baby face? Because he is a heel, and I don't know if I'd ever want to see him be a baby.
But I mean, it reminds you so much of Rock, right? Which you always hear from a lot of people. But Rock started out, well, other than the Rocky might be a shit, but he really started out as a heel. So I mean, it's kind of like Ricky Starks is doing, and I think he's great. I mean, the facial expressions. That's why I don't like that they put the brakes. I get why they had to put the brakes on the whole like teasing the split thing. But when Cage would go in there and the faces he would make,
when he'd be like, I'm so happy about all of this.
Yeah, like the thumbs up every time. That cracked me up every time he did it. So, and plus, like trading off finishers, like, no, you finish him. No, you finish him. It's funny because it's supposed to look like, they have great chemistry, but you're like, good tag teams don't pull this type of shit, right? So so that's why, like, I guess Christian, whenever Ricky Starks comes back, I guess you're right. Like, that's going to be when you really see like the program advancing. Maybe this is them like treading water because of injury, right?
Yeah. And was that about getting Christian over, or was that he was going to try and get Ricky Starks over, and they're going to, because it felt like that other young guy that they want to push into the main event scene. And
that's a great question.
He was feuding with Darby Allin a lot, and they weren't going to quite make that push for him because they were focused on Darby Allin. But like Darby Allin's made, like he doesn't have to ever have a belt again, and he can main event anytime they want him to main event, I suspect.
But he's got a lot of star power for sure. Yeah. I mean, he's one of those guys, like, he's already over, right? You don't have to worry about getting him over anymore. Right. Those that's done. I mean, they just have Sting around him for, I don't know. I call him Sting's son now. Like, it's kind of like, I don't know why they have that, because I don't know who's supposed to get who over. Like, you can't mention who before, because I don't think Darby, and not that I'm a huge Darby fan. I wish he would change his ring gear a little bit, but I mean, you can't deny the guy's over.
Right. Yeah. So is that what their plan is? And are they gonna hold for a little while? I guess it depends on how long they probably have a better idea than we do how long Ricky Starks is going to be out. So if they think he's only going to be out for a little while, they may just tread water and then jump right into it. Otherwise, they may move him on. But it was good. This was a good match. I wish they didn't have to have so much schmoz, but this was also, as a couple of pointed out, this basically had to work as the go home show for Double or Nothing because next week's Dynamite is preempted by the the NBA playoffs.
That's
So
right.
on a Friday night at 10 o'clock at night, and a lot of people aren't going to see it. So it's going to be, it'll probably have a lot of good stuff, but it's not going to be these are the angles you have to know to go into Double or Nothing show the way you normally would get.
I mean, that's an intense weekend, right? And you got to see the go home show on Friday night, and then you get a day off, and then you see Sunday. I guess now that they moved the pay-per-views to Sundays because they used to be a Saturday when they first started.
Well, they're good. They're still going to do both. They said that they'll go because Full Gear. They haven't announced All Out yet, but Full Gear is going to be on a Saturday, in like on November 5th or 6th or something like that.
Oh, okay.
So they said it's going to go back and forth. It's going to depend on the weekend and what else is happening on a given weekend. Like in this case, I think they decided to go with Sunday because it was Memorial Day weekend and people weren't necessarily going to work on Monday, and it worked out. But they will still do Saturdays unless they look like they're going up against a UFC pay-per-view or something.
And plus, I mean, doing the Friday show before, then the Saturday after, that's a lot, right? I mean, that's usually.
Well, I don't think
you
they
get
had
like 5 days between your show and the pay-per-view.
And I don't think they originally planned on that either, but I think it worked out for them that they don't have to work night to night, back to back. So that's good for them as well. In fact, Cameron and I have been talking about, we're not going to do it, but we were talking about actually driving out to Jack because they're selling like a trio of tickets for Friday night Dynamite and then the Saturday Fan Fest with autograph sessions and then Sunday Double or Nothing. For like a trio of tickets.
You have to be in Jacksonville. That's
well, I know we'd have to drive.
It's not like a cultural mecca of any kind. Yeah.
If it wasn't for
like Blake Bortles as quarterback for a long time, if you remember
that. If it wasn't for the 13-hour drive each way, I'd really consider it. But
yeah, it's an easy drive too. I-10 all the way, right? Basically, so yeah. But yeah, so I guess after the Team Taz had the beatdown and everything. So that's just for like we talked about that feud and what they're basically trying to do with that. Yeah. The Varsity Blondes had a promo after that, which they bore me. I mean,
the Varsity Blondes are great. Brian Pillman Jr. is great. I
like him.
Depending on what you've seen coming in and out, I know some people are all about Griff Garrison because he's a little bit younger, a little bit goofier, and he's been on a lot of like the BTE and the Sammy Guevara blog and being apparently he's just a real goof. And that gets a lot of people who are watching YouTube on his side. And some people just like his work more. I like Brian. I've been watching Brian Pillman since MLW when he was part of the Hart Foundation with Davey Boy Smith Jr. and Teddy Hart. And that was a really, really, they did some really good stuff. And he has some real good in the ring chops that we've seen some of, but we haven't seen all of. I mean, like the Varsity Blondes as a gimmick is weird. I know they were trying to figure out to do something with it. At some point, they were going to be the new Hollywood Blondes. And they thought better of that, but they wanted to keep the Blondes thing. I'm not sure where the varsity bit came from. I know like Griff Garrison's thing was that he was like when he first started was he as a job guy on Dark. That's why you got to watch Dark because it's where the next generation
you can watch coming
from. He was the Ivy League varsity guy, so it was like some weird blending. It's a weird gimmick. It's not awful. It doesn't make you go, oh, I really want to see what those guys do. But they're making it. They've added a bunch to it. I was thinking that this week, like with the jackets, and we talked about this last week. Adding Julia Hart as a.
I mean, that makes sense creatively. Yes, that makes a lot of sense. Made
act work, and it led to my favorite line of the night where during their match when Don Callis said, "One thing we always say in Canada, you can never trust a Hart." And that made me laugh so hard.
I mean, that's just John Callis is like basically one of the best heel managers I've ever seen. But yeah.
Adding like the Julia Hart cheerleader bit really makes the gimmick work. And the thing I really took from this is that Pillman's a really good promo. He's becoming a really good promo. He is definitely a better promo than Garrison. And if they keep him being the talker of the group, they can do something.
I just don't find Garrison intimidating at all. Like any of his moves, his persona, like everything, like just nothing about it screams like, man, I want to see you kick.
The thing is, and I don't know what it is, especially in a show where they always talk about how small all the wrestlers are. Like Griff Garrison's actually a really big guy.
No,
he's like
tall,
6'3" and 220 pounds. If in real life, he's probably a really big guy. It's just for whatever reason, it doesn't come across on screen.
No,
Maybe-
not at all. And that's why that's why it's boring. That's why I hope at actually at this point that Brian Pillman Jr. actually gets a little bit of a singles push at some point, because I think he's just way better. I mean, just flat out, he's just way better.
And right now is like and this is the perfect time to even have this match, because they timed it to the release of the start of Dark Side of the Ring, which started with a two-parter about the Brian Pillman story. And Brian Pillman Jr. himself is in a lot of that two-parter, obviously, talking about the life of his dad. In fact, it ends about him becoming a wrestler. It's very emotional. You can't see him as anything other than like a super over baby face coming out of that. And there's they should take advantage. It feels like to a certain extent they did. They have limited time because they've got all this stuff for Double or Nothing, but they should do more with the Varsity Blondes. They should do more with Brian Pillman, who had an interesting he had the main event on Dark, and that's not something they just give away, even for the YouTube shows. They don't just give away the main events, and he had the main event slot on Dark and win over Luther, partly obviously to give some momentum to the Varsity Blondes coming into their big tag match on Dynamite. But he did have that, and I think the Blondes have had like 3 good tag matches against higher ranked teams on the depth chart, whose entire job is there, yes, to beat them, but to make them look, because they had a really good match against FTR a month and a bit ago.
That's right.
That entire match was about FTR making the Blondes look really good before beating them. They had a match against SCU where that entire match was about making the Blondes look good before beating them. They had a match on Dynamite like 2.5 months ago against Jurassic Express, where a lot of that was about making the Blondes look good before beating them. And then they have, not spoilers, they had this match this week with Young Bucks, which was a lot about making the Blondes look good before beating them. It feels like they've done a lot of that. They feel like they can get something out of there, and we'll be seeing more of them, especially because the other teams they've been doing that with that may have been higher than them on the depth chart, like Bear Country and Top Flight, are out of action for an extended period of time due to injury. So, but it's good. Their tag team division is stacked. They have
that's for sure.
Versus, say like WWE, where there's apparently just 2 tag teams on each show, and if one of them goes out, then they have nothing.
Basically, yeah. Are the Varsity Blondes in the Battle Royal on the pay-per-view for Double or Nothing?
If they are, I think
you would think so, right? I mean,
I'm pretty sure. Pretty sure Pillman is. I'm not sure. Both of them should be if they're not.
I don't think it would be one without the other. That'd be.
I wouldn't think so. They do it sometimes depending on who they want to squeeze in. And I do want to bring up the Battle Royal, but we can do that as we get closer to the end, because now we got to talk about the other tag team, because there were 2 really good tag teams.
Yeah, the Mox and Eddie
that were very different from each other.
Let me say something first. Mox and Eddie, the thing they have, and you can tell they're having fun out there.
Yes,
they're having a shitload
Mox
of
would
fun
be
out there.
funny because he spent the first 2 years just talking about how he was going to leave it all in the ring, and he was always very serious. And now,
I'm still
what do you bring? Now he can be like, what do you bring to a super kick party? Do you have to super kick people? I don't super kick people. Does that mean we're not allowed to go?
Yeah. Oh, you know what I like? Here's the thing. You know what Acclaim was making fun of them before they started making fun of his wife. But when they were making fun of Eddie, and then Mox was like, Mox was like, they're right. Like, he's
right.
like clowning Eddie too.
He looks like a package of Salem cigarettes. Isn't that what they call them? Something like that.
Yeah, Newport. Or like,
Newport.
Like, he looks like a new pack of Newport cigarettes.
And trying to do. And then, of course, they had the great line about his wife, and then they punched out. The other thing I thought was weird.
If you call your podcast Oral Sessions, you're kind of setting yourself up for these type of things.
I'm surprised no one's done it already. But yeah, and then of course he punched out Anthony Bowens before the match even started. The other thing I noticed that I noticed right away is they did, when both sides got to do a promo before the match, when they did the Acclaim promo, Anthony Bowens did all the talking, which is very unusual.
But then Caster does all the rapping, right? So
well, even when they've done like normal straight up talking, they've like Caster do it, but because he's much better. I was thinking like on the one hand, this makes sense because Bowens needs more time on the mic because Caster does do all the talking, and that's like the one skill Bowens hasn't really shown any skill in. But on the other hand,
I think he's good at it now.
This promo was better than I was expecting, considering you like almost never hear him talk. But on the other hand, I was like, on the other hand, you're getting ready to be on Dynamite in one of your biggest matches against, John Moxley, arguably the biggest star in the company, you don't want to give your best talker the mic. But then he came in, but then you could kind of see once Caster came in and started doing his rap, you're like, oh no, I get it now, because no one's going to remember anything else anyone said except Max Caster making the line about Renee coming into his DMs to get him onto her oral sessions. Like, that's the only remember I was going to talk about. It was a great line. It was perfect for the heat they wanted. And then they had a short but really good match of just beating the crap out of the Acclaim. Then the Acclaim trying to cheat like they always do with their boombox and the chain, and John Moxley and Eddie Kingston being dastardly baby faces who are not at all about cheating. And if you're going to cheat, then they will cheat better.
Right. They're the anti-hero, basically, like a base team, if you're going to say like
yes.
that. Well, basically kind of like Stone Cold was for a long time, you know?
Yeah.
I mean, that's kind of been Moxley. Although Moxley hasn't ever done really like out and out heel things before, like Eddie has in his, he's back and forth role he's had on AEW. But I mean, I guess the closest thing was like when he had the MJF thing. Remember when he like, I guess that was kind of cheating. When he did
even before when it first started, when they were building up to the Moxley Omega Lights Out match, and Moxley was clearly the heel in those. Like there were things he wouldn't go to, but he would attack from behind, like he attacked Omega from behind regularly and slammed him through stuff, and he played the heel through their entire match. And he didn't really turn babyface until after that first match at Full Gear. And but then and then he played it mostly straight, unless the heel, like he plays it straight unless the heel cheats, and then he'll cheat like he did at the MJF, where he's like, as soon as the rest back turn, like, all right, well now I'll do the paradigm shift. Because
or like the Acclaim match, I mean, they also use weapons too, but it's like if you cheated first, then I'm going to cheat too. Like, you might not cheat first, but if you're going to cheat, then they'll bring a gun to a gunfight, that type of thing. Yeah. So I thought that was a great match. I want to see Mox and Eddie, so of course Mox and Eddie went over, and we'll get to what they did later on the show, but like I really want to see them. I mean, just to put it simply, I want to see them win a lot of matches. I want to see Mox and Eddie right now. And I didn't expect to like this tag team as quickly as I did. But I think, again, it's because they just work so well together. I mean, they're really chemistry, even with their moves and with the talking and everything. They just really know how to work off each other in the ring.
It's one of the things that's a benefit to having such a strong tag team division too, is that they can move people easily between the singles division and the tag team division without feeling like they're taking a step down, so that they don't have to worry about having their top guys cluttering up the top of the singles division and making it like when Moxley was in top of the singles division, they could move Omega into the tag division, let him have a lot of high profile matches without feeling like anybody was taking a step down. And now they switched and they moved Moxley so we're not just having Moxley versus Omega matches forever, but you're giving like Omega a chance for a lot of different opponents without feeling like Moxley has taken a step down. And they do that because it's clear that the tag division and the singles division are on equal footing and will both be equally excellent, and if not better.
Mox is one of those guys that, like, whatever he's doing, he's never going to have like a dark feud. He's never going to have like an elevation feud. Like, whatever he's doing, he's going to be Dynamite material. Like, even if it's going to tag, like this is, like you said, he's probably the biggest star in the company. So I don't know. I kind of want to. I think it's debatable between him and Kenny Omega, to tell you the truth.
Him and Jericho. It's like
of course Jericho. I'm going to forget. Yes,
and what they go and do and try and do. But then they're gonna have a match at Double or Nothing with the Young Bucks, because the Young Bucks can have a great tag match with anybody, and they can work with any style. And anytime they work with someone like a really different style, it's going to lead to a really different match, which we found out today. But you have known for a while.
And even Young Bucks. I know we talked about this. I know you're a big fan of them, but I actually was not a big fan of them at all when they were faces. I just thought they were kind of overrated. I thought they're frankly kind of bland and boring. In ring style, no. Outside the ring, like anything outside the ring, I thought was bland and boring.
They're better as skills outside the ring, but inside the ring, like the match Revolution with Kenny Omega and Adam Page is one of the best tag matches.
Oh yeah, that's what I'm saying. In the ring, they're fine. I mean, they're great even. But I gotta say, I like this heel stuff, and I didn't know that I was going to, because they did this. They teased this heel turn before for months, kind of with them. It's like, are they going to join the Bullet Club? What are they going to do? That type of thing. And it's like whenever. So now, whenever they do it, it's like the thing that I like, because when they had the first promo from them, when they basically dug full into being heels, everything they talked about was like, wait, this is why I hated you as faces. But now you're like leaning into it as you're in front of your heel act. And that's what I was like, they're doing like I want to see people beat them. I don't necessarily want to see them go away. I don't. It's not X
What I've
hockey,
heard,
but I want to see them get beat. And so I'm like, man, like, so that's like I'm not gonna say I like them, but I want to see them. You know, so that's of course John Callis again, huge part of that. But yeah, that's why I'm like, I'm kind of liking the Young Bucks heel act.
I've never seen it, and I probably won't go back to see it. But from what I've heard, they've spent most of their career, and especially their over career, as heels. Like their big runs in Ring of Honor and TNA and New Japan, they were heels for most of that. And that's in PGW, they were heels in most of that, and that tends to be when they get over the best. And I can kind of see that because it's very much about being very smug and yes, we are the best, and we know it. And that's hard to
their
get
little
over.
gypsy headbands and everything, and their Jordans and everything. I'm like, all right, I get it. I want to see you get like
shoes and all of that stuff. All right, so let's see. What was it after Eddie?
Oh, so then they had the Sky Page. I called them Sky Page, Sky Scorpio, and all Lego, all ego, Ethan Page. Here's the thing: I don't like their promos too much because I feel like it devolves into them verbally filleting each other.
Oh yeah, I mean that's what, and they do a lot more of that on Dark than they do on Dynamite, where it's basically like you're the best. No, you're the best.
Yeah,
and it's
tired.
They hadn't, they joined up almost as soon as Ethan Page joined the company. Only like a couple of weeks after Ethan Page joined the company. But there was the thing I didn't get about it. In some ways, I do because they have such limited screen time. Like they went to a lot of trouble to get Scorpio Sky out of SCU.
Yeah,
immediately
it was awkward, kind of. I don't know what about the whole
with
thing.
Someone else, and I'm like, well, what'd you do? I mean, I get you did it because you want Ethan Page to have screen time, and you did it because you wanted Ethan Page to have screen time. Hang on, just 1 second. I got to get power cord.
Sure. That's better.
Hope that I can keep this thing from dying. Yeah, they did it because they wanted to get Ethan Page to have screen time, and there's only so many hours of Dynamite.
I mean, the guy can promo, he can talk. It's just I wish he had better material because it's literally, and Sky too. Sky can talk, but it's really all of them going, man, no, you're good. I'm like, okay, at least now they focus on beating up Darby Allin and an old man, so that's good. But
well, they haven't figured out who they are, and they have no gimmicks yet. Like Sky's whole thing has been, well, I'm one of the best wrestlers in the company, and I don't get a shot. Well, you need more than that. And they have found something with Ethan Page of, Darby Allin and I have a long-standing rivalry that goes back to years in the Indies. So they can probably come up with something from that, but they need more. I mean, he didn't have a great gimmick in Impact, but he had a great tag team. And his stuff where he was talking to himself all the time and there were multiple different Ethan Pages was weird, but at least it was something.
I like that gimmick though. I like stuff like that. Like the split personality type of thing.
Yeah.
I think that could work if you're a good actor. I mean, if you're good with it. I mean, if you can sell the gimmick.
I can tell he wants to do something different. So, and I guess
I think he's very stuck in what he's doing now, right? I mean, I think this Darby program is just starting, basically.
So got to figure out what does all ego Ethan Page actually mean. But all that said, they're both really good in the ring. They're really good people to pick for opponents for a Sting in-ring match where he's going to do live in the middle of a pay-per-view. So it's good to have that as a tag team, and B, good to have it where because like Sky's no joke. Sky was the number 2 in the New Japan LA dojo for a long time, where he trained a lot of great wrestlers. So he can go, and he knows exactly how to do this stuff. Ethan Page is really good, so they can both work. They know how to work a good match and protect Sting and make it not obvious they are protecting Sting. But that'll be good.
Sometimes they have to get over, so like they
have to get over as heels. And it's hard to do right now because there are a lot of baby faces, but there are so many heels, and there's only so many people for them to feud with. And a lot of the guys who are most over are heels. I mean, Inner Circle were heels until just now. And it's when you have MJF and Inner Circle in one company, it's hard to for anybody to pay attention to you as a heel. unless you're Max Caster. You have to be the level of great. And Ethan Page and Scorpio Sky are great. Right? They're much better in the ring than Max Caster, but they're not that level. They don't have gimmicks that can match that.
But yeah, they just need the writing to catch up to their talent, basically. That's what I think they have to do. What else did I see in here? Yeah, and I was like, Aligo kept yelling a lot during his promo. So I'm like, and they're always yelling about the same thing. Dark Order, just something I thought about Dark Order, because they got involved in this match. But are they like face security these days? Like anytime like a face gets a beat down, like they're the ones that come out?
So many of them, and they're so goofy. Well, I feel like it's like they there's a correct feeling that they need to be kept on screen so we don't forget about them. But they are clearly being tied to Adam Page and Adam Page becoming the head of the Dark Order or something. I mean, that seems like for sure the direction they're
he's
going.
Like de facto. They're always talking about him, and he's not like rejecting them anymore.
Well, it's like they're not going to do it yet because they're going to do the Brian Cage singles match and maybe something else. But that that they're going to get out of the way, and then I don't know when then is, but clearly they're going to keep doing more stuff with him and Dark Order until they make that happen. But it's like until that happens, they don't have anything for them to do, but they don't want us to forget that they exist either. So
they used to be a cult. I mean, that was even their entrance songs has joined the Dark Order, and like that seems really easy to do right now.
Yeah.
Like they don't even throw masks at anybody anymore. It's just hey, like you want to be part of our group? Yeah.
Really recruiting. They're just hanging around and eating ice cream and
making fun of Alan Angel's small penis all the time. I'm like, why is he in that group?
Yeah, or just making fun of jokes. Or and wondering where Anna went, or number 99.
Oh, I do miss Anna Jay though. But
yeah, me too. She was a really up and coming part of their women's division. But I think she'll be. I think it'll seem fat because it seemed like almost, maybe because they grew it so fast, it seemed like almost no time at all that Chris Statlander came back, even though she was actually out for a long time.
She was out for a while. I mean, because she basically just got was starting a decent push, and then she got injured right in the middle of it. Although she's stuck with the alien gimmick, which I don't hate as much as other people, but I wouldn't mind if she changed it.
They don't put it in your face as much now that they've.
I do like the makeup job now that she does.
I like the new makeup job and the new hair job a lot. The hair, the new look, I like better. But also now that
it's hey, look, I'm Gamora kind of just in this section.
Now I would say now they've combined her with best friends. It all gets over easier, and it's like maybe she doesn't. She's not from another galaxy, but she's a weirdo like the best friends. And the best friends.
Well, it's not like Luchasaurus is a fucking dinosaur, right? So.
Yeah, exactly. And the best friends is where maybe one day if they ever break up Jurassic Express, he can join best friends too. Because it feels like best friends is the faction of where do we put the weirdos who don't fit anywhere else, but they fit.
I mean, just have Orange Cassidy get them over, basically. And that's what you do.
Which led to my favorite part of the night and one of the best silent promos I've ever seen, which was Kenny Omega and Don Callis trying to convince Orange Cassidy to sit out the main event. And I just want to revel for a moment in the world we live in where Orange Cassidy is getting ready to main event the pay-per-view of the second largest wrestling company in the world. I mean, I thought it was weird when we talked about Eddie Kingston main evented a pay-per-view for the second largest wrestling company in the world. And now Orange Cassidy is going to main event one, which is great, but also something you never thought.
Well, I did hear that Orange is Tony. I did hear that Orange Cassidy is Tony Khan's favorite wrestler.
Well, it's a mix. Well, what it is it's like a weird mixture because from the way they explain it, he was very dubious about Orange Cassidy at first, and he had to be really talked into it. He did not think the gimmick would work and would work on television. He didn't.
But like once he bought into it, he really bought into it.
Like Cody and the Bucks brought, and they're like, no, you really want him, and he was like, I don't know about this, and that's why it was like Tony Khan's idea to put him with the best friends, so he can be like, well, he can be out there hanging around with the best friends in case things don't go over, so he can just be their whatever, like Marco Stunt, just in case, because I don't feel comfortable putting him in a ring because it's too weird and too silly and people might not like it. He had to see Orange Cassidy really get over in individual pieces and matches before he was convinced to put him, in that singles program with Pac, which was one of the best things from Revolution last year.
Oh
And-
yeah, oh my gosh, one of my favorite matches ever. Actually, is that match. Yeah.
But then once once they saw A, how much merchandise he moved, and B, that he could actually go in the ring, they were like, okay, I take it back. This guy is potentially a main event talent. Let's see how far we can go with him. And so far, he has moved metrics when they put him in, and we'll see if that works for a main event title shot.
But I like that because like we kind of alluded to this earlier, but because Orange Cassidy had that feud with Jericho, pushed him to like a lot of levels. But then after that, they kind of lost what to do with him, basically.
Yeah.
And
Well,
then they changed his style, tried to make him a little bit more serious, like kind of like a serious wrestler. And I thought those matches were very boring. We're basically relied on the Superman punch a lot, and then but I think the last couple of matches he's had, especially on Dynamite, it's been a good hybrid, I guess, of the two styles. Basically, what it is, he starts out doing his normal Orange Cassidy, like the drunken monkey type of stuff, and then then he gets into the serious part to wrap up the show. But even the finishes now, like I like that he uses the beach break more than the Superman punch now. And I think, and also he's one of those guys where, and I hate to say it because I love Orange Cassidy.
The orange punch.
Oh, sorry, the orange punch. Yes, that's you got to keep up with the gimmick and the character.
Right.
But what was I going to say? Lost my train of thought. But yeah, so with Orange Cassidy, like to think that, but now he's actually getting to do these matches, and I think people are seeing that he's actually like a lot better than just like the Pockets guy or something like that.
Right.
And this is what I was going to say earlier. So he's the type of guy that if you put someone who's not good with him, I don't think it's going to be a good match. Like you can't just put like Griff Garrison and Orange Cassidy together.
He's not going to carry somebody
right.
else.
But if you have somebody like, if you like the Penta match was also awesome. The one with him.
Yes,
I mean,
that was really great match. That was fantastic.
But that's because Penta's, especially because Penta's such a good theatrical wrestler, that carries it. I mean, because it is theater when you have Cassidy out there. It's not going to be, even though he is technically better than a lot of people give him credit for. That's not why you're not there to see that. You're there to see him like.
Well, you're there to see both. You're there to see both pieces, but not one or the other. One or the other by itself is kind of dull, but both pieces together are funny.
That's why I'm like him. If he recovers in time, I mean, him in the match with which I was a 3-way. I was like, I did not expect that to begin with at all. That threw me for a loop because they hardly ever do 3-ways on AEW.
I don't think they have ever done it for a title. They did some early on in some of the early pay-per-views when they had a ton of people and they wanted everybody to get some screen time, but that was it. And they were just matches. But they don't do, but especially once Dynamite started, I don't think they've done them at all. And this will be the first one on a pay-per-view in like 2 years they've done one. They really stay away from it.
Yeah, but I mean, my original point being that Orange Cassidy, when I said that, he needs to get someone good in the ring with him, having Kenny and Pac in there with him. Yeah. I'm very excited to see what that match is going to be.
As long as he's not hurt, no, it can't be good, but I'm excited. But then we got, which also gives us, is the thing we were talking about with Britt Baker, although in many ways it's the complete opposite, is that he knows his gimmick, because he can go in the ring, but his gimmick is also completely over, even though he never talks. But he knows who he is, and what he does is over. So he knows exactly how to do it to get the most out of it. But also, just like in the ring, it also works the best when he's with someone who knows how to help him get the most out of it. Like if it was just with, random wrestler, it probably wouldn't work. But when he's sitting there slowly tearing the papers in half, and Don Callis is slowly watching him, slowly getting encouragement, it's perfect. But you have to have like someone who's going to be able to do it. Just the Penta match was a lot like Penta knew exactly how to slowly take the glove off and annoy him.
The pocket sequences, I mean, those are so good.
And annoy him very badly in a way that, with the right guy who knows how to work with that style, it's going to be great.
Yeah, I mean, because, if you look at it psychologically, Cassidy's gimmick is really that you're going to get annoyed at him. So you have to really be good at selling being annoyed, or selling that you're really hating fighting this guy, because that's the whole point. That, he gives you like the weak ass kicks and strikes and everything. It's because like you're supposed to be upset that you're fighting a joke, but then it turns out that it's not a joke, right? That's the whole thing. Yeah. And that's why I think a lot of people who are more casual wrestling fans love that gimmick.
Yeah. He's my son's favorite, but I thought the whole setup with Cal, especially coming off the injury last week and not knowing, it really sold it well. And all the stuff with Omega and Callis is great. It's the thing that makes watching the Impact stuff watchable. Because all this, I wish they, Callis has a great entrance in Impact where he comes out. They have to play this video of hands with puppet strings on it as a puppet master, and his music is Pachelbel, Canon, and C, and it's perfect. And they should do that. There's this long ongoing rumor that his contract with Impact is almost up. And when it's up, he's going to come over and be Kenny Omega's manager full time.
I mean, he should. I mean, he's one of the top men. I mean, because I never knew much about the guy. I don't watch Impact, right? So, I mean, people said that he's a commentator. He's been on New Japan for a long time. He did a lot of commentating there. But I mean, just the smarmy heel. I mean, I guess since maybe the days of it, like Paul Heyman, like that's what I'm thinking. Like, but even Heyman, like it's a different kind of
Heyman level stuff. He did an intro. So they had a pay-per-view last month, an Impact pay-per-view last month that was Kenny Omega versus Rich Swann, title for title. One person would walk out the joint AEW Impact champion, and Don Callis did the intro for Kenny Omega. It was one of the best heel promo. It was the best heel promo I've heard this year. It's one of the best heel promos I've ever heard about Kenny Omega being the best wrestler of the last 20,000 years, and you should be honored just to be in the ring. It was amazing. He sold.
I mean, that car salesman aesthetic has been missing from like wrestling for so long. That's why I love it. Even with like the jackets and the shades and everything, like he really just sells like a douchebag. Like he's really good at being a douchebag, and like that's what you want to see out of him. He's just so good at it.
It's an interesting thing because
Omega, he's not like one of those people that you like. Oh, you want to see him succeed or win a bunch of matches or something like that. Yeah. Like MJF is getting to that point where it's like, even though he's a heel, you kind of want to see him win a lot. But like, no, you want to see Callis and everybody involved with him lose because like you want to see that.
Like you want to see them get full of themselves and full of themselves and full of themselves until they lose. And at some point they're going to. And it's like because like Omega is doing the belt collector bit right now, or he is now the world champion in 3 different companies. He's the world champion in AEW, he's the world champion in Impact, and he's the world champion in AAA Lucha Libre. And
how does that work, by the way? Like, how do you get to
do all of those simultaneously? Like he defended both AEW and AAA's.
No, but like every promotion said, "Hey, we should make Kenny Omega our champion right now."
Yes. So like he was so. Some of it was an idea that he and Tony Khan and Don Callis had together, but some of it's also been worked out circumstantially. So there's a working relationship between AEW and AAA that's been there since day one that they haven't been able to take as full advantage of as they originally planned to because they've been under this pandemic for most of their time. But that's how Pentagon and Phoenix came into the company. In fact, in the original Double and the original Young Bucks versus Pentagon and Phoenix match was for the AAA Tag Team Championship, which the Young Bucks.
THQ also AAA?
Do what?
THQ was also AAA, weren't they?
Well, a lot of guys came from AAA, or they had been. Sammy Guevara was in AAA, and it goes back and it goes across lines because Impact had like the same relationship. So Sammy Guevara was in AAA. For a while when I first, among other things, when I first saw him, he was the mixed tag team champion with Scarlett Bordeaux, who's now over on NXT for a long time before she left to go to so they've had a lot of mixes between that way. But like that first year, you had a lot of AEW guys went. So AAA's big show, their WrestleMania show each year is a show called Triple Mania, which usually happens in August each year. And part of the deal was that a lot of AEW talents were going to go and be on that show. So like that first year, at the same time that AEW was gearing up for All Out, a bunch of guys went to Triple Mania. So Cody Rhodes did a tag team with Hijo del Vikingo and Cain Velasquez before he went to WWE against I can't remember who the other 3. It was like Pagano and 2 other guys. It's been too many years. I can't. And Kenny Omega and the Young Bucks did a tag match against Pentagon and Phoenix and Laredo Kid, which was great. And some of the wrestlers from the women's division were in a Reina de Reinas match. So they did a bunch, and they had a bunch of those where like Laredo Kid has come over several times.
Right.
a lot more. And so part of one of the things that came out of that was they built to they used that to build to a world title match between Kenny Omega and Ray Phoenix at the big at AAA's big end of the year PPP. And one of the things that at that time AAA wanted to have a big name foreigner as their champion in order to build up a big local challenger to go babyface challenger to go beat. So you had like this weird thing where Kenny Omega was a babyface in AEW, but it was a heel in AAA. If you went and saw like both sets of promo, but then the pandemic hit and he was not able to defend his title for like a year. And by the time they were able to actually get AAA up and running again, he had like one other defense against Dragon Lee, which was really good, really good, and then nothing. And because he was like going to be on a deal where he'd go, AAA has like 5 major pay-per-views each year and then a bunch of smaller shows, and he was going to go and headline like a bunch of those, and then for that year, and then it didn't happen because of the pandemic, and and then by the time they were able to do it again, he was getting ready to get to the AEW championship, and everyone's pretty sure that Tony Khan's basically said, my world champion is not going to lose on your show for the first time. He has to drop the AEW belt before he can lose one of these other belts.
Yeah, because that builds up the credibility for your belt, right? So yeah.
Exactly. But so far everybody's been willing to go along with it because he has proven to be a draw even in other countries, and he's put on great matches. He finally he headlined a very delayed Triple Mania last year against Laredo Kid, and he's still the AAA Mega champion. In fact, they have now scheduled. He's going to defend 3 different world championships this summer. He's going to defend the AEW championship at Double or Nothing, and then like a month after that, he's got to defend the Impact World Championship against Moose, and then a month after that at Impact next pay-per-view, and then a month after that, he's going to have defend the AAA World Championship against Andrade, now that he's free of WWE.
Oh, that's right. I remember that name. Yeah.
And, that is expected to be because Andrade is a really great wrestler who never really got to show how great a wrestler he was in WWE, and everyone expects a great match. Now, on top of that, a new Lucha Libre organization is getting put together by Roosh, who used to be in CMML and is now in Ring of Honor, and has not really shown any interest in going to any one of like the larger US organizations, even though everybody wants him because he's really good. But he is in fact not talking about, is putting together an organization that's going to have its first pay-per-view in June, Federation.
Wow.
That's bringing in a bunch of AAA and ex-CMML talent and some AEW talent. So Roosh and his brothers, Dragon Lee, and Bandito are going to be on it. Andrade is going to wrestle on it as like the big names. Pentagon and Phoenix are going to wrestle on it, and Ty Conte and Red Velvet are going to come over from AEW and do part of a girls tag match on it. So
okay,
they apparently have
Conte a lot too, so that's good.
Yeah, she's turned into a really good wrestler, and so that will be very interesting. It's hard. No one knows if it's going to last because pay-per-view doesn't do like great business in Mexico generally. And they are apparently spending a lot of money in order to lock down talent. But if somehow it does, and AAA and CMML are both weak right now, that could be the start of something very interesting that could conceivably have a lot of strong AEW ties. So we could see some more stuff going back and forth there. Who knows? But I'm going to watch it's going to be like June 20th, something like that. I'm going to watch it just because I'm curious to see how it turns out.
Yeah, that's kind of like I was saying earlier, like we're talking about biggest star. I mean, it just still boggles the mind that literally the 3, I mean, they're not as independent as we think, because they do have strong ties to AEW, but the fact that 3 separate companies are relying on Kenny Omega to improve their business. I mean, that's a huge honor. I mean, that's huge.
Yeah. The Kenny Omega Rich Swann pay-per-view last month was the highest drawing pay-per-view Impact has had in 15 years. Like the last time they had one that did more, from what I read, it was Samoa Joe versus Kurt Angle, which makes sense because really
right?
big card with big names. So you're probably not going to top that. But they got their biggest draw in a long, long time, especially since it was a legit title versus title match. And even though exactly who you thought was going to go over went over, it still drew a lot of interest. And it was a really good match until Rich Swann got really blown up at the end. But even then, it was really good.
I mean, I've seen Kenny Omega wrestle a broom, right? So I thought it was a
Blow
great
it
match,
all.
no matter what Jim Cornette says. So
Yeah, he can, and a 9-year-old girl. You know what? All of those were entertaining. Um, so speaking of someone who can drag someone to a really good match, although it's not really fair, we did have an NWA World. We had 2 women's matches on this Dynamite, which is unusual in and of itself.
Well, one of them wasn't really a match so much. It was just a setup for.
What I will say is, of the 3 times that they have had Rebel come out and do a match as with Sheeta as part of an angle, or with a babyface, because I think the other 2 were with Big Swole as part of an angle. This one was the least worst, and that's not anything against Rebel. That's not really what she should be doing. Let her just be Britt Baker's stooge. Don't make her get in the ring or anything. It's not gonna be good for anybody. But this one was fine. This one wasn't actively awful. Like the one last year with her and Penelope Ford and Big Swole.
That was so terrible.
That
Because
was
it did nothing. It didn't serve a storyline. It's just stupid.
I mean, it tried to serve a storyline, but it didn't, and it was awful. That was the worst wrestling match I saw last year, and it just lowered everyone who was involved in it.
That's what I'm saying. At least this one wasn't really a match. I mean, it's compared to, and if you compare it to the Serena Deeb Red Velvet match, it's honestly, again, like we were mentioning Serena Deeb, it's like she's just there, like, hey, I'm Serena Deeb, I'm champion. Like, I'm like, why do I care? But one thing I didn't realize is I really like Serena Deeb's wrestling style. Especially because that's why even, I joke about Angelico and everything like that, but another reason I like him because I like submission wrestling a lot. I'm big into that. And so to see her do like a lot of moves, try to little Dean Malenko out there, like it's kind of cool that she has all these moves. Plus Red Velvet, like you mentioned before, she's improved so much with her own ring work. So it's just one of those matches that I think it went the time that it should have, and it did a good job of showcasing both their talents, really.
And they've had several really, like, over the last month or so since that Britt Baker Thunder Rosa match, they've had consistently really good, and some of them like way over delivering, like the Jade Cargill Red Velvet match from the Shaq show. I mean, it was more like their match than it was a tag match. That way over delivered. But just from what I thought it was going to be, but like all the Jade Cargill matches so far have maybe they're heavily practiced. I don't know, but so far they've over delivered.
I mean, no, she's an incredible athlete. She's incredibly athletic. But the thing that I thought she was going to be bad, and you should never judge a book by its cover, first impressions, that type of thing. But that first promo she ever gave on AEW was so atrocious.
The thing was, it was the first promo was so awful, and they've gotten better. It's not her strong suit, but you know what? She's not afraid to do it. But it was so awful, and then they kept having them, but they would never show her in the ring. And I'm like, usually when they will never let anyone wrestle before a big match, it's because they're terrible at wrestling. And if they are feeling more confident letting her talk than wrestle, and this is how good she talks, this thing might be awful.
Right. But that's usually how the launch goes, right? So
that's fine. And the mic work needs work, but she's working at it, and she is getting better.
Her promos have gotten repetitive, where she's saying this the same thing over and over again. That's why I kind of want this lawyer,
it feels like it's
storyline to kind of progress, because she can't keep saying "I'm that bitch" over and over again. It's like, I get it. You don't sound like you're reading anymore when you talk, but just say something else now,
or saying something memorized. That's why it feels practiced. Well, it's like you got 2 extremes you can have. You can either have a Big Swole who can talk and has that star power and charisma and kind of je ne sais quoi, but her ring work is awful. Or you can have a Jade Cargill who, whenever she opens her mouth, you're not sure if a train wreck is coming out or not, but in the ring, it's great.
Yeah. Or you have Dr. Britt Baker,
well, you don't get those right. That's why you only have 2. That's why AEW has 2 of those.
Right. That's right. Thunder Rosa and Dr. Britt.
And those don't come along. They're lucky to have 2, because that does not happen very often.
And it's not that Sheeta's been a good champion in the sense that she's a good fighting champion, but like it's just been a very boring reign.
She doesn't ever get to promo, and I don't know why, because when they let her talk, she can talk just fine. Yeah. So I don't, and like when they let her go out and do stuff, and I remember when she came back from Japan and they stopped putting her in like the weird outfits, and they were letting her wear like the power suit stuff she was wearing in Japan, and she looked like a star. I'm like, well, why don't you dress her like this all the time? And why don't you let her talk? Because when she does promos, she talks fine. I can understand everything she says. She's got a lot of fire. They never let her talk.
You just need to write something for her. That's the thing. Like maybe that's it.
Maybe.
You almost get the idea that Britt Baker comes up with all these ideas on her own, almost.
Well, except she doesn't, because I know she gets a lot of it from Cody and a lot of it from Kenny, but they don't write them for her. They just like, you should do this and do that and do this other thing, and then she makes it her own, but she can't. And you get the feeling now that after like a year, she doesn't. She probably is still getting some ideas from the back, but she can also go out there and go like, "What do you want me to do? You want me to run down Sheeta for a minute? I can do that, and it's going to come out completely natural and completely normal, and you will buy it." And I don't know. It's you never know what's going on in the back that makes them not want to let somebody do something. But I am kind of, especially with Sheeta having been champion for so long and they never let her talk. I think she's been a good champion, and they should let her be champion again. But next time they should let her actually feud with people.
Right, and plus it's also like we've mentioned over and over again. It's Britt Baker's time. It's
Britt Baker's time.
Really just her time. I mean, it'll be such a big travesty to put the belt on her in the pay-per-view.
It is Britt Baker's time, and then they need a heel champion for other people to chase, and not just Thunder Rosa. They shouldn't just go from Britt Baker to Thunder Rosa. They should make it, which I don't think they will, because I don't think they're going to put the belt on Thunder Rosa until they sign her. But which I think they will. But that'll be a nice chase, and that gives a lot of it gives somebody like Red Velvet. If there's a heel champion, Red Velvet can. Jade Cargill will be kind of left in the wings, but whatever. But like, Red Velvet can chase her, and Big Swole can chase her, and Chris Statlander can chase her, and you can probably get good matches between all of them. Probably at least two of them. You can, with her and Britt Baker, you can get pay-per-view level matches.
And at least you have a good story leading into those matches because of Britt Baker's personality, So you at least have something. You wouldn't just be like Sheeta, where oh, I'm next woman up. Like that's just basically all it's been with Sheeta. Britt Baker would be like, oh, like I actually want you to fight me. Like you give her a reason to fight you. That type of stuff.
Yeah.
One thing we didn't talk about is what did you think about the traded, I guess, promos between the Pinnacle and Inner Circle this week?
Oh, they were fine.
One was a segment, one was a promo. So what did you think about them?
I didn't need either of them. I get why they're doing them, because they want to make sure people, their feeling is, and I think they're probably not entirely wrong about this, is that Stadium Stampede is going to be the selling point. It's either the selling point or it is tied with the Kenny Omega matches. The selling. It's not like the last pay-per-view where the electric barbed wire death match was exploding barbed wire death match was the selling point for the show, and everything else was just coming along with it. This one, it is, I think, it's a mixture of, because who's with Kenny? It's Pac and Orange Cassidy, and I love both of those guys, and I'm sure the people at AEW love both of those guys, but they don't know if they're proven draws for a pay-per-view. So it's a mixture. They're like 50% of the draw for this pay-per-view is the Omega match, and 50% of it is Stadium Stampede. So they are going to sell the shit out of Stadium Stampede, and I don't need it sold to me because I'm sold on it. Like I've been watching every week, plus all the extra stuff. I like the Pinnacle a lot. I like Inner Circle a lot, and I love the Blood and Guts match. I thought was great. So I'm going to watch it. So I don't necessarily need another segment, but I understand why they're doing it, just in case somebody wasn't watching one of those other weeks.
I thought it was a weird thing because, first of all, let's talk about the first one that was on. There was a Pinnacle segment, right? They're eating dinner, and there was that thing where basically MJF said a couple of words, right? And then what you had the FTR guys, which one, Dax or Cash?
I think it's
the bald one. He talked, right? And then
they let
Wardlow
for some reason
just got
Wardlow
mad at
never
the
gets to
waiter,
talk.
like his head on the ground. And then I guess that was his thing to do. Like, it was just, like, I agree with you. Like, it didn't really serve a purpose. Like, I get it. Like, you guys don't like each other. I already understood that. And then Jericho's promo, like, it just wasn't memorable. It was just like, oh, like you said, like, we already know what's going on with this feud.
Yeah.
Like, just get to the match already. Like, what else are you going to say to each other? Like, at this point, like, you've already beat the shit out of each other. We just wanted you to get it to the next one. So I mean, it's one of those things where I guess they just have to be on TV so you remember them. But as far as like,
they can't let them wrestle each other. They don't have any reason or time for them to wrestle someone else. So they're just going to have them come and talk. And
I will say, I'm not sure how I feel about Inner Circle's faces. I just don't. Especially when you look at like Jericho is fine because Jericho is always going to be fine. But when you look at someone like I look at Sammy, and I still
I
think he
think
works better as
Sammy
a heel
makes
than a
it great.
face.
Maybe. I mean, some of it's his face, but I think he makes a good baby face. I remember there was when they were doing the match with Jericho and MJF versus Sammy and Jake Hager for who was going to be the tag team. And
Right.
Sammy spent that whole match as the fiery baby face, making the baby face come back. And he did it really, 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 really well. I think so. The main thing is that we've only ever had Blood and Guts as for a match as Sammy as a baby face. Like somebody pointed out during Blood and Guts, like that was his first match since February. And so far it's been his only match since February. And so he hasn't had a chance to have a match because he was supposed to go have a bunch of matches at Impact and it didn't happen. And I think that's the one thing we're missing for a lot of these guys. They haven't had a chance to have matches as pure baby faces. I think we take it easier, more believably if they've been able to have baby face matches against someone other than the Pinnacle, who they can't have matches against. Like if they were going through the Pinnacle like one group at a time or one person at a time, and we had a bunch of Inner Circle Pinnacle matches, but we've had one, and then we've had a lot of talking segments.
Yeah, instead of like a series, it's just like all of them against each other every couple of weeks, basically. But even like Jake Hager, it's hard for me to like really get behind him and everywhere he's been. Like he's not a very good natural face, I think. So I mean, but
as a heater for a face group, it's fine. But yeah, it's weird. As a heater for a face group, it's weird. But I think that's the only way it will work. While he's part of a larger face group, and he doesn't have to like carry it with baby face energy. He can just be carried. He can be carried along with it. The other thing will be like, what is Stadium Stampede going to be like? Because last year it was pure comedy, and it was probably.
I'm not as excited for this one. I'm just not.
Well, we haven't, like last year we didn't know what it was going to be because nobody was doing cinematic matches all over the place, and we had no idea what it was going to be. So not only was it great, but it was also a complete surprise. I thought Stadium Stampede was my pick for the third best match I saw last year.
It was awesome. I mean, it was so entertaining. Even like the actual wrestling spots they did, like even like the Young Buck spots, like with the bunch of suplex, the German suplex, just like I was like,
I showed it. Like my whole family watched it, and Teresa hated it because she hates campiness in wrestling. She just wants it to be all serious.
Have some fun. Lighten up, Francis.
But the kids loved it. They just wanted to watch it over and over. And and that was a 40-minute match that did not feel like I was like, there's no way that was 45 minutes.
Right. No, it was ripping the whole way. Yeah.
Yeah. And this one cannot be that. This cannot be a funny match. It has to be super serious. And super serious like 3 weeks after Blood and Guts. So I don't know. We'll
super serious Stadium Stampede match. I mean, the Stadium Stampede, and you're playing in a big football stadium. Like it's not a serious setup to begin with.
Now, usually though, if not even usually, I'll give them the benefit of the doubt. So far, AEW has never planned one of these things where they didn't, where like we're used to it with WWE, where they'll say things like, we're going to have a boneyard match. And you'll go, what on earth is that? And you'll ask somebody at WWE and they'll go like, we don't know what it is. We just said it because it sounded good. And they'll decide on the day, and maybe it'll be good, and maybe it'll be a Nigerian drug match.
Prison match.
Or something. And you'll be like, what? Whereas AEW has never announced one of these and not had a solid basis of an idea of what it is and what it's going to be. So I don't think they would have announced Stadium Stampede 2 if they didn't have a really good. Now, every so often they'll get something will go wrong in the execution, like the end
like the exploding barbed wire match.
But although you know what, I've seen the exploding barbed wire match now 3 times because I watched it, and then both Cameron and Hannah wanted to see it, but it didn't work out that they could watch it together. So I watched it once with Cameron and once with Hannah. They both loved it. They were diving under the covers. Cameron had to watch it through with fingers over his eyes because in his own words, I can't watch, but I can't look away. Hannah was diving under the covers. And then at the end, when the big voice started saying 10, 9, 8, she was screaming at the TV, run, you've got to get out of there, run. And neither of them noticed how puny the final explosion was. For them, it might as well have been a giant explosion. They were just like,
That's great for them, but I think a lot of us were expecting something.
Well,
I
I'm
mean,
sure
it's
everybody's
already been well covered. It was supposed to be something bigger.
My point being that even with like the goofy stuff, it's probably that didn't go well. It's probably not as bad as we think. Even with like the fall off of the cage of blood and guts is not the disaster people made it out to be. The explosion at the end of the death of the barbed wire match. They should probably do the barbed wire match again. They should wait a year, but in a year they should do it again and make sure it explodes right that time. But
yeah, and well, so here's another thing I just want to touch on the Stadium Stampede. Wasn't another iconic image for me because it's a Stadium Stampede match, right? So it's like you think of horses. So
right.
An iconic image from the last one was Adam Page riding through
on the horse, and they're not
going to have that. And it's just like, like, and I understand what you're saying. Maybe have faith in what they're planning, but if you call it a Stadium Stampede match, that's what you're going to compare it to. And it's just that's one of those things that I'm having.
Well, one thing I think they can do, because Inner Circle was in the first one, is that they actually can do a lot of callbacks and stuff from that one. That now this time Inner Circle is doing it, and they're like Santana and Ortiz can throw somebody in an ice chest and lock them up and be like, now it's your turn.
Right.
But they can do it in a serious, but they can do it in a serious way.
So we're looking forward to what's going to happen more with that. And then was there anything else on the show that was really worth talking about?
Well, I know we talked about Young Bucks versus Varsity Blondes. Did we talk about it in depth?
Oh, Miro. Let's talk about Miro because the Young Bucks Varsity Blondes was the last segment, right? So I do want to talk about that. But the Miro, let's talk
Miro
about
and Lance
or TBS title. I don't know what they're. I guess
That's
you're saying they're going to.
They said they're going to keep calling it the TNT title. So I guess it's just going to be the TNT title. But Miro, first of all, I love him. He should be champion. I mean, that guy. Yeah. I'm glad that he's not doing the video game, even though I'm a big gamer and everything like that. Yeah. They have figured out his character, and they figured out what his gimmick should be, and they've given him the push that he needs.
What I can't figure out is Lance Archer, because the way they seem to be setting his gimmick up, or whatever his angle is right now, is he going to leave Jake for Sting? Because that's kind of what they keep setting up. Because every time the Sting is in trouble, he comes up to now, and then Jake comes out and like, oh, I don't know. But Lance never actually goes after Sting ever.
Well, it seems like
I don't understand what they're doing with that.
Lance has made like a mild face turn, which may only last as long as. No, I mean he's definitely since probably since the Brody Lee tribute, he's basically been a baby face. More baby face than not. I mean, he still goes and mauls people, but he's still, he's come out and helped guys who, or at least ever since he came out to confront Sting, and Sting was like, you should be the top guy.
But is he good friends? I don't think they ever established that. It was just like Sting giving him a dressing down one day, kind of like almost like an Indian son. He's like, oh my, I gotta make you proud,
Why aren't I I need to make Sting proud. Why aren't I a top guy? And ever since then, it's been a bit more baby, not 100%, because he'll still tell me like, get out of my way, but it's been a bit more baby face like, and they're definitely setting him to be the baby face in the Miro match, which I can't imagine he's going to win, because you wouldn't want to put a title on Miro and then take it,
drop it immediately
right away.
And Miro deserves a long run with the title, honestly.
But
he changed his shorts to look like the title belts. I mean,
I know. He's like, I just had these shorts made. The one thing I noticed, like his promo, I liked his promo, but it's kind of weird. It felt like I was like, okay, he can talk, but this feels like somebody who's been in the WWE system for so long, where he just had to memorize lines and say them, and now he has to come up with stuff on his feet and do it, and he's not used to doing that. So like, there's some fumbling where it's like it feels like somebody who's having to come up with stuff on his feet for the first time, and it doesn't always come out. It's like, I want to thank Jesus Christ for giving me my strength and aggression. And
I rolled my eyes at that. I was like, come on.
I was like, I can't tell if I'm supposed to.
What the hell?
I was like, I can't tell if I'm supposed to roll my eyes at that or not. But generally, I really like the mirrors that they find.
You know what I love? When he said that, when he had that promo, he goes, I'd like to thank Jesus Christ. You were reminding the crowd go boo. And I don't know if he was just genuinely booing Miro, but the timing of the boo cracked me up.
Great. And he reacts to the crowd in a great, like going back even to like the wedding episode where somebody started singing a song. So he started like repeating the song that they were singing for giving them the lyrics. Like he can work a crowd really well. And he can wrestle a great monster match really well. And that may be the sleeper match of Double or Nothing, maybe Miro versus Lance Archer. for just
I
sheer.
think, yeah, I mean, in the ring, it's going to be two heavyweights. I mean, I still am hoping for Brian Cage versus Miro match. Because here's the thing, I bring up those two, they're basically, and you may not agree with me, but to me, when I see Miro and Brian Cage in the ring, I'm always wonder how they lose any match they're in.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, they don't. Well, they don't very often.
Massive and good and agile and all that stuff. And it's like you always wonder, like you look at them, they should never lose a match. People like that.
Well, they don't very often. That's one of those things where I was like, it was 50-50 with it. Because if you look, I think Brian Cage has lost 3 matches. I mean, he does not lose. People talk about guys not getting a push because they, you know, especially the big monster heels, which they picked a bunch of, who they come in, and some of it's because they jump right to the top, and their first feud is with like the world champion, and they're not going to beat Kenny Omega, and they're not going to beat John Moxley. Not their first time. So they come in and they may lose, like Lance Archer came in and won a bunch, but then lost against Cody because he wasn't going to beat Cody. I mean, that just wasn't going to happen. Yeah. And he wasn't going to beat John Moxley. But you also look at it. People, right? So some people will complain that, well, he's not getting a push because he, you know, his first big pay-per-view match he lost. Like, yeah, but he was in a big pay-per-view main event, and then he was in a big pay-per-view main event again. And if you look at who they lose against, Lance Archer loses against Cody Rhodes and John Moxley, and that's it. And those are the guys that he shouldn't be beating. And Brian Cage loses against Cody Rhodes and John Moxley, and that is it, because those are the guys he shouldn't be. I mean, he even beat Adam Page. He will probably lose to Adam Page. And it's like, and there's a handful of guys that they're just under the top of the tier. Like Pac loses to Kenny Omega and John Moxley, and that's pretty much it. Those like the only guys he loses to.
Pac I'll put in that group too. Pac is someone who when I see him in the ring, you wonder how he loses a match.
And he doesn't. He does. He's a lot. He loses to the very but I mean, I know it feels like sometimes because they're not holding the belts that they must lose, and they do, but not very. Like Pac, he's lost to the Young Bucks, and he's lost like once to Adam Page, which he should lose. He should probably 50-50 with Adam Page, because Adam Page is up there at the top of the card. But I mean, he actually has a victory over Kenny Omega, which a lot of guys do not. Like, not many.
That's true. That's a very good point. Yeah, no one ever goes over Kenny.
You know, he's got a victory over Adam Page, and not many people. He's lost to the Young Bucks, and he's lost to Kenny Omega, and he's lost to John Moxley, and that's pretty much it. So it's like he doesn't lose very much, but he's mostly just in the main event picture. So mostly when you see him, he's in a main event, which means he's against. He's against.
Yeah, well, especially in this part, right? I mean, that was a quick. They just come out of nowhere to put Pac in that.
Yeah.
But so yeah, so I guess now we can talk about the. Honestly, I'm gonna let you talk a little bit more. What you think about the main events with the Varsity Blondes versus the Young Bucks? Because I kind of I'm not big on either team, so I kind of laid there.
I thought it was really good. I thought it was a great tag team match. I thought it was really interesting in that you have an idea of what a Young Bucks match is, which is move, 100 miles an hour, double teaming and moves. And that's not what this is. And they, you know, it's not the first time they have proven that's not the only kind of match that they can do, that they will match their match to their opponent. This was actually much more of an old school wrestling. It was slow, deliberate. As heels, they were going around and being goofs and delaying things and making it go slow and getting heat on the baby faces, but also letting the baby faces make comebacks and bumping really well for the baby faces and making them look as big a stars as they could, and having to cheat to beat them because they're heels, and the baby faces are, and making sure the baby faces look strong, and running a really deliberate, really well thought out tag team match. And I thought it was a really good tag team match. The Young Bucks are always great in the ring, and this is the best the Varsity Blondes have ever looked as a tag team. And it is no coincidence that the two best tag team matches they have had were against the Young Bucks and against FTR, who were both great teams who worked really hard to make them look good. But they looked really good here. They got Don Callis on commentary, giving just that extra bit of smarm and hatred. It was almost as good as, we didn't mention it, it was almost as good as Taz on commentary during the Christian Cage match, which was there just so he could bury Christian through the whole match, which was hilarious. but Don Callis being
Yeah,
great.
Taz just cracks me up. Like he doesn't. I don't actually want Taz. Like like I don't hate Taz. Like I hate Don Callis. Like
Right.
even though I know Don
No,
Callis
he's
is good,
just
but like
fun to listen
Taz
to.
is just like, and even like when Taz is a heel announcer, he's not very good at being a heel announcer. He just like
He can do
even
it.
when he
Like,
makes fun of somebody, he's
him
like,
and
yeah, but okay,
Excalibur-
I guess.
him and Excalibur are among the best parts of Dark. But
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think they're the
know-
best team on AEW.
Probably, yeah, I would think so.
And I don't think I mean JR just there to say his catchphrases basically.
JR brings a bunch to main event matches. He makes the main event matches the way nobody else does. Not like stuff that he's not really into. You get he's not really into it, but like he made that Thunder Rosa Britt Baker match. He made that the exploding barbed wire match. He made the winter is coming. John Moxley, Kenny Omega match. Like those would not have been as good without JR calling them. But those are the kind of things he can call it. The only thing I've heard that's close to that was, and I keep mentioning it, specifically for the Kenny Omega Rich Swann match for the Impact title, they brought in Mauro Ranallo specifically for that match just to call it, and that was crazy good. Like you immediately go like, oh, I get the difference between somebody who's really good at announcing and someone who's just okay at announcing, and how much better it makes a match when you get somebody who's really good at announcing. And like there's like definitely matches that JR comes awake for, and when he does, they become instantly better. But then when he's gone, then like Tony and Excalibur have to carry everything else.
I think it's funny that my friends who are just, the casuals who just got into wrestling, they're like, hey, slobber knocker, right? Bullies you ugly. I'm like, yeah, I've been giving you shit for years, man. It's what he does. This is what you pay JR to do. He says stuff like that. And it works.
JR, but
especially once he started finally like learning people's names and everything, he really came on. And I know people thought, I think a lot of people are like, oh, it doesn't really matter, but I'm like, it's a little kind of, you want people to get the name.
What's weird? Right? It's not that weird because it's just sort of the cycle of life. So one thing, after I got the WWE network, I finally I went back to watch every pay-per-view in order because I never watched any of this stuff growing up. So like, there's a lot of stuff I'd heard about. I'm in the Attitude Era now. I've gotten to 1997.
Oh, so like you went back and watched like WWF in your house and that type of stuff? Like
yes. Yeah. So I started with WrestleMania 1 and have been watching through all the In Your Houses and all of that.
Oh wow.
But which has really young JR sitting there announcing next to Vince McMahon and Jerry Lawler. And JR is the one who knows who everybody is and knows what all the moves are, because they've had a bunch of those where they bring in a bunch of guys from Japan and they bring in a bunch of guys from CMLL, and like Vince McMahon and Jerry Lawler have no idea who these guys are, what they're doing, why. And like JR is the one who's like, I know who all these guys are. I'm getting over.
He was a talent relations guy.
I'm getting over their background. Yeah, for a long time. And now it's like completely obvious. Like he was the Excalibur for that booth, and now he's the crusty old veteran who's like, now this is a wrestling match versus Excalibur doing the Excalibur thing. But I thought this was a great tag team match, and especially toward we talked about at the beginning, they've really made the Varsity Blondes game. Adding in Julia Hart, I think, was like the cheerleader thing, especially if she can get involved and make them get rid of the cans or something, and she's not just standing there. They give her something to do and then spray her in the face so you shriek and fall away. It makes
with acid, right? Because I don't know if that's apparently what it is. Everybody reacts like it's acid in those faces.
That's great, just like the green mist, but it works. It 100% works. It makes them look terrible. It makes the blondes look strong. You had that great line from Don Callis, like, everybody in Canada knows, never trust a heart. And I laughed really hard at that. Hey, and we had a Dean Malenko sighting on this.
That's right. He said four more roles.
I'm always feeling like 50-50 on all these on the callbacks to the Attitude Era. Like
like our friends didn't have
the one last week.
That was a reference to.
I thought like, what was the point of doing the one last week? But I also think about like, this is the youngest drawing wrestling show in the world right now. You got at least half their audience wasn't alive when a lot of this stuff was invented and has no idea what they're referencing. So they either
like with
think
the
it's funny on
the HBK Ric Flair thing last week. That's another one that's like that's a long time ago now.
That's a long time ago now. How many people watching the show have any idea what they're talking about? or when they're seeing the bubbly truck with the hose, that's the first time they've seen it. I have
Uh,
no idea that that's referring to anything else. So I don't know.
I will say, oh, go ahead. What are you saying?
And it's like I get nothing out of nostalgia, and some of this stuff I only know about by osmosis. I didn't never experience directly anyway. So for people who really do like it, fine. But I'm like, all right.
Well, like in the Hardy Compound video, I marked out huge when you saw Gangrel show up and you saw Hurricane show up. I mean, that was really cool. But that was just like, so that stuff like that is fine, I guess. But again, it takes a little bit of explaining to people who didn't grow up like watching wrestling 30 years ago or whatever. Yeah. Which makes you feel so fucking old. But so so that match happened, and I gotta say, loved the post-match stuff. Mox and Eddie coming back out, putting some paper holes on their shoes. And jacking the shoes is such a hood move.
Well, they've been mentioning. Well, they mentioned it
for some reason.
Yeah. Well, they mentioned it a couple of times. I mean, going back to when they rammed the car into their van, they talk about stops taking time to steal their shoes. We got to hurry up. We got to hurry up and get out of here. And the Young Bucks, have been talking for a month about their $10,000 sneakers that they wrestle in. So it's like you have two totally different things that they have been building up to getting their shoes stolen. So it made perfect sense. It fit the characters. It fit the storyline. It did not come out of nowhere, and it both paid off and built up to the next one. And
I wish they had like telephone lines in the ring so they could just use that when it's telephone line after it gets done, because that's the next step of the hood process. So that's pretty. Like, I love that thing. I was like, that is so hood and so Eddie to do this stuff.
Yep, it's perfect.
And it really, not that you did need to get more fired up, but then you're like, all right, here's some sauce, here's some spice on this feud. Like, you want to see what's going to happen next with them. So you want to see them beat the shit out of the Young Bucks. Do you think they're going to go over the Young Bucks?
I think they're going to go. It's a good question. I can see it happening, and I can see them getting fucked. But they've done that to Moxley a lot. Moxley is strong enough that he can get over it. But at the same time, like, the Young Bucks have been the tag team champs since Full Gear, I think, in November of last year. I mean, that's about 9 months. That's a long time. That's a long time to hold a belt. So, and I don't see anybody on the horizon face team that's a better choice.
Definitely doesn't have the momentum that they do. I mean, they have a shitload of momentum going into this match.
They have a lot. There's, if you look at the list of who else is a
they beat the
prospect,
Acclaim, right? That was who's beneath them.
Right. Who else is a prospect to beat them? Like, they're
it should be like FTR, but
right. They could just go back and forth between FTR, but that doesn't make sense while FTR is in the middle of a feud with the Inner Circle. Right. They would need time to build that feud up, and it doesn't make sense while they're both heels also. I mean, they could do it, but it doesn't make sense.
But then you have like the Best Friends level, the Jungle Express level,
like Best Friends doesn't seem, although the way Tony Khan talks about it, he definitely has a view that Best Friends are in his view are more upper card players than I think a lot of people see them as. But even then, they haven't built up a feud. It doesn't seem likely that Best Friends or Jurassic Express or I don't like, who else is there? I mean, they have a really deep tag team division, but I don't know anybody else who seems like, I think everybody knew that when FTR came in, that like FTR and Young Bucks, one of those was going to be the team to take it off of Hangman Page, and whoever took it off of Omega and Page, it was going to end up being FTR versus Young Bucks. It made all the sense in the world, and that's what they did. And it was clear for like 6 months, those teams were all at that level, and it perfectly made sense. But there's nobody here with the drawing power of Moxley and Kingston. There's a lot of matches they can make if Moxley and Kingston are tag team champs. It gives a lot of stuff to do with the Young Bucks if they lose after turning heel. And it allows you to keep Moxley in the main event mix without having to send him back to the singles division and get in the middle of Omega, because it doesn't seem like, I don't know, it still seems to me like the most likely scenario that they've been building up for the longest time is that eventually Hangman Page, with the help of the Dark Order, beats Kenny Omega and is the one to take.
I think they're taking the long route with that one.
Yeah. But I think that's probably this year. That's either All Out or Full Gear or some special at the end of the year. But I think I don't think they can wait much longer than this year for that, because but I think it'll be in the second half of this year. I think they're going to give Kenny Omega like a good 9 months or so with the belt. That seems to be about what they do with the belt is 9 months to a year.
Yeah, but I still wonder, like, if they're, that's why I can't really say for the Mox and Eddie, because one thing I also think is funny during Mox and Eddie's matches, you see the crowd, they're so over, the crowd can't even decide who to chant for.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
You'll hear, let's go Eddie, let's go Mox, like, if people are saying the same, like, they're overlapping each other, you know?
Did
like,
you notice that they've also changed Moxley's ring gear, so he's wearing the same colors as Eddie, so now his ring gear is black and green. It's mostly black, but all the highlights and everything is in green, so they're wearing the same. But I mean, yeah, I think I would not be surprised if they did, mainly because if it's not them, who's it going to be? And if it's not them, then it's like another 6 months of the Young Bucks as tag team champs, and I don't think they're going to do that. And it can't just be Young Bucks versus going back and forth between Young Bucks and FTR all the time. So like, who else? It can't, like, the next most obvious is either FTR or Proud and Powerful. And Proud and Powerful aren't going to do it because they're in the middle of all this stuff with Pinnacle.
Right. The same reason that's
because they're in the middle of all this stuff with Pinnacle. Jurassic Express isn't there. I mean, unless they really wanted to do a push, but it doesn't seem like that's likely. Best Friends aren't there. Maybe one day, maybe, but if they really want to give them a push, but that doesn't seem likely. Bear Country is hurt. Top Flight is hurt. Like, I could actually see them maybe trying to do it for Top Flight, but that's going to wait until they're back and they're 100%. It's
Dark Order people, none of them are ready for any of this.
Dark Order is all tied up with the Adam Page stuff. They're basically not in the tag team hunt at all.
I mean, they are. It's just random, like, well, it doesn't help that Silver's injured right now.
Yeah, Silver's in. Well, like, in theory, their main tag team is Evil Uno and Stu Grayson, but they're not going to. That's probably a long way away, and they're probably not going to do that. I mean,
I think that's one of the most underrated tag teams. I mean, Uno and Dos, Uno and Stu, they are amazing. Especially Stu, I think, is an awesome wrestler in the ring. And Uno's deceptively good. He's one of those people that you wouldn't think is good, but like, he is solid, like, everything he does. And he's a good mix of like ring work and theatricism, like, with everything he does. So I think Dark Order is one of those people that, as much as I love Uno and Stu, you're right. I don't think they're really ready for that type of, like, to carry the belt basically right now for the company.
Yeah, I think I'm going to come down and say that Moxley and Kingston are going to go over because it makes the most sense. And generally AEW does stuff that makes sense. If they don't, it's because they have a really, really, really good idea for what they want to do at All Out.
Right. It's like a specific plan, the specific goal they're working towards, like that type of thing. Yeah. So, okay, I think we basically ran over the whole show now. I guess next week there's going to be the show that's on Friday instead of Wednesday, and then we'll. I guess we can run down the pay-per-view.
Maybe we wait and record Monday so we can do the Friday show and Double or Nothing all together.
Okay, well, if you want to do that, let's go ahead and run over who we think is going to go. Do you know the card? We can talk about who we think is going to go over.
I know the card. Yeah, I know the card. Okay, so I know the card, but I know in no uncertain order. So there's the men's casino battle royale, because they do two of them. They always do the men's at All Out at Double or Nothing, and they do the women's at All Out. So this is the men's casino battle royale. I have no idea who's going to go over. We have 29 participants and the mystery man, and everyone says, like, if the mystery man is not Daniel Bryan, the entire internet's going to melt down because people
I didn't even know
lose their
there's
shit.
A mystery spot. Okay,
there's always a mystery.
Daniel Bryan's the rumor. That'd be huge.
Because it's always somebody. It's not going to be like. Last year it was Brian Cage, and I think it keeps being. The first year was Adam Page, and last year it was Brian Cage, but it's because it's a mystery spot. It's always somebody who's it's CM Punk a lot of the time. Right now, just because of the way things have lined up, the mystery it's Daniel Bryan because he's left WWE and hasn't signed a new deal.
Has he? Is that for real that he actually left? Like his contract?
His contract has expired, so he's no longer under contract with him and no longer wrestling. So he could, in theory, go somewhere else. But it's like the Rey Mysterio situation from last year, where his contract is expired, but he's under active negotiations with WWE. And realistically, it does not seem likely that he is going. You know what? I just thought of something else from this show that I'll come to it in a second when we talk about who's going to go over. realistically, probably he's negotiating with WWE. It's not impossible, but I would be very sick. It's more likely it's going to be like a Matt Seidel level guy where it is a surprise, but people will go like, oh, it's him. He's really good, but he's not the superstar I was expecting. Because the first, I think people were a little, they've been a little spoiled by the first Double or Nothing, John Moxley coming out, and now everybody wants somebody at that level. And that's not going to happen. It could maybe be Andrade, maybe, who's working a program against Kenny Omega, so it makes sense. It could be, especially while New Japan is basically shut down for an extra long length of time, it could be a New Japan guy who's over here. But there is a segment. There is a segment that thinks at some point Kota Ibushi is going to come over and wrestle a match against Kenny Omega while he's a heel and champion. So some people think that, but I don't think any of those. I think Daniel Bryan is more likely than one of those.
I think Daniel Bryan would be fucking huge, man. If they got
it. Yeah, I don't. It would be great, but I don't think it's going to happen. I think
I don't think CM Punk. I
think CM Punk.
I don't think CM Punk's ever going to.
I think CM Punk is more likely than Daniel Bryan. So if it's anybody of all the people that are out there that have been let go, if it's a lot of whom can't wrestle anywhere until July anyway, if it's anybody, it's probably Andrade. But I don't think it's going to be him. It could end up being somebody who's like big on the indies who's signed somewhere else but comes and does a one date thing or is allowed to do.
It's gonna be Goldberg. It's gonna be Goldberg.
No, but it could be like a Brody King or a Hiel del Vikingo or Laredo Kid or something like that. I don't think it's gonna be like a good wrestler, but not someone who's like some superstar. I don't know.
Okay. Is that the same for the women too? So you said the women also have a 29 or a 30 person battle royale? Yeah. And is there a mystery woman?
Yeah, I remember the first one, the mystery woman was Mercedes Martinez, and then she went to WWE. And I can't remember who the second mystery woman was.
It'd be kind of cool if they did Selena Vega and Andrade.
Selena Vega is apparently going back to WWE. So
what? After all that union stuff?
After all that stuff, she's coming back. So
that was a big deal when that happened. Okay, yeah. That was a big. She made a big stink about it.
I guess they've
been money heal wounds, right? So yeah.
Yeah. Well, apparently WWE has closed down the department that was supposed to be doing all those third-party relationships and selling that stuff and fired all those people. So I guess they're just not going to do that.
Oh, okay. So I guess just a complete policy change then. Yeah.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. So so it's not going to be Selena Vega. I think the second one, it was like Diamante or it was somebody who's on now that isn't getting like.
Where's Ivelisse? Ivelisse has been like off.
Ivelisse got released. She apparently had like some big backstage heat with Thunder Rosa, and nobody liked working with her, and she was arguing with the producers a lot, so she got released. And Diamante, and the thing I feel most bad because she was in a tag team that had been getting a push with Diamante, and Diamante stayed around.
They're tag champs.
And it feels like and now that's gone, and it feels like Diamante's been getting like the pick because Diamante's been, she's been taking some high level losses, but Diamante used to never lose. She only wrestled in the mid card, but she never lost. And now she's lost to both Chris Statlander and Layla Hirsch, which are not like nobodies, but suddenly she's been put into.
But she's still losing.
It feels like she's taking a little bit of the punishment for that stuff, which is too bad. But
yeah, it just doesn't seem fair, really. But yeah.
Yeah.
So okay, so then you got what, the Paige Cage match?
The Paige Cage match. I
don't know who's going to go over on that.
I think it's going to
be. Like I said, I can't imagine Paige ever losing a match, Brian Page. But at the same time, you would think that Christian would have to get over, right?
I think that's going. No, well, that's Adam Page versus Brian.
Oh,
Page.
Sorry, that's right. You're right. Adam Page, right. Brian. Yeah.
I think that's going to be Adam Page. I think he lost the first one so that he could win the second one.
Right, you're right. Yeah. So Brian Cage. Adam Page is going to go over.
Adam Page is higher up on the card, and Brian Cage can lose to someone high up on the card on a pay-per-view. It's like the weird math of wrestling, but I think Adam Page is.
I would accept Brian Cage losing to Adam Page more than say Darby Allin. Like that I didn't like that TNT match at all. I thought it made Brian Cage look stupid, basically, losing to Darby Allin the way he did. And so that's why, like, you're right. Like, there's a little bit more credibility with Adam Page being also high up in the card. That if Cage loses to him doesn't necessarily hurt him that much.
No.
So And plus, there's gonna be some Team Taz bullshit. Like there's gonna be some interference
Maybe
or
that
Dark Order and all of them.
maybe that exacerbates Brian Cage leaving Team Taz or something like that.
Yeah, which is, I wonder how that dance is gonna work when they do that whole thing that they're teasing. But I guess we have a little bit of time to figure out what's gonna happen there.
Yeah.
Because Ricky has to come back. So then there's the so that's that one. And
Ethan Page, and after that there's Christian Cage is in the Battle Royal, so he doesn't have.
Oh, that's right. Oh, yeah. So Darby Allin and Sting versus Ethan Page and Scott, right?
I think we're all pretty sure Darby Allin and Sting are going to go over.
Yeah.
I would be amazed if Darby Allin and Sting lost that match. Sting's first in-ring wrestling match in a pay-per-view in like 6 years. I think Ethan Page and Scorpio Sky are there to lose that match.
And I think a lot of fans need to see Sting win a match right now. Especially a lot of younger fans are kind of like, I don't get the big deal about this guy, So
well, he won. He won that cinematic one against Ricky Starks, and he was the one who got the pin, but against Ricky Starks. But yes, he needs to do something in ring where people are around him, and I think he wants to. From everything I've heard, he really wants to. So I think that will be. I think they'll be going over in that.
Are there any other mid-card matches before we get to the title matches?
I'm sure there's. Let's see. There's those. There's Cody versus Anthony Ogogo.
Cody versus Anthony Ogogo, right?
And we haven't talked about it much. And there was one thing I want to mention from the show is the fact Anthony, they've been working really hard to put over this power punch of his that decimates people right away. And
with the big blood and everything.
I heard a lot of people who really liked his one this time with Austin Gunn. I'm like, I thought Austin was over bumping a lot. It was a bit over much. For some people, that's exactly what it should be. It was a bit much for me.
Well, not like Rock, like Stunner level, but like yeah.
The thing that for me is that, and it's kind of like we were talking about with Jade Cargill, is that because they've done the punch thing, all of his matches have been like 30 seconds and over, and it's just he's come in and he's walloped the guy. Okay, he had to wallop Austin 3 times, but that's all he did. He didn't do anything else. So we haven't seen an actual match out of him yet.
Break his hands, right? I mean, that should be the whole key to.
On a pay-per-view, he's gonna have to go like 15 minutes.
Right.
And we wrestle. And we haven't seen any key that he can do that, even though he's been training from what I understand, he's been training for at least two plus years, because he was an early signee. Like originally, they had suggested him for the Jake Hager role in the Inner Circle, and Jericho turned it down because he didn't know who he was. So he's been with the company since almost the beginning, but this will be
almost day one,
match. But at the same time, just as with the Shaq match, it's become clear to me, Cody is not going to get into the ring for a major event unless he knows the match is going to work. So I feel that even though we haven't seen him do anything yet, I'm not worried about it, that they would not be putting this match on the pay-per-view if they didn't think it was going to work.
So Gogo's going over, right?
I mean, the whole point of it seems to be to make something out of a Go-Go.
Right.
So it seems like it makes the most sense for him to go over. But Cody hasn't really done anything in a while. I mean, he's beat up QT.
I agree. I completely agree.
He lost, and he went 50-50 with Shaq, and he's beat up QT. He hasn't really done anything big. So it feels like if somebody at Cody's level hasn't done anything for a while, they should win at a pay-per-view. But Cody loses at pay-per-views a lot. Of all the top guys, I don't actually. Kenny may have lost slightly more, but like Cody lost like 3 pay-per-views.
Cost to MJF, right? He put MJF.
He lost to Jericho, and then he lost to MJF. So it feels like that might, but and he eventually lost to Darby, but he beat Darby at like 2 pay-per-views in a row before he finally lost to him. But it doesn't seem like they want to do that. They don't want to take like a year to make Anthony. They want to make him right away. So it feels like
he didn't lose much shine by losing at this point.
Right, that's true. No, he's not going to lose anything by losing it, and he hasn't been around enough for it to matter anyway. So plus it lets them keep the feud going, and he keep wrestling with the other factory guys and letting the whole thing is supposed to be about getting the factory guys over, especially Nick Camarado and Anthony Gogo. So they can.
Yeah, and you remember in a private conversation as you were talking about the Olympic medal, the Olympic logo being on the.
I love that so much. They wrote
I
his
am
name out
like
of the
a
Olympic
bronze
letter.
medalist having an Olympic medal. It's like I guess it's better than attending the Olympics.
Well, it's not
but
the Olympic medal. Well, it's
two
the
people. It's the bare minimum for being able to put that on your trunks. It's basically the bronze logo. It's the bare minimum for being able to have that
well,
as your.
it's not like a medal. It's the logo. It's the logo of the 5 rings.
Yeah.
That they use, but they've made it spell Ogogo, which it does extremely well because it's just OGO. It's
Isn't there a
amazing.
huge like a copyright thing with the Olympics? Because that's why Kurt Angle had to change his the Olympics.
Well, because it's his name, so they have changed it just enough because it's clearly the letters OGO, but it's also clearly the Olympic rings that he's referencing. So I think that's brilliant. It's just an extra, and his promos have been great. His smarmy heel promos have been great. And
I mean, he's Dudley from Street Fighter 3. I don't believe any Street Fighter 3 aficionados, but he's like the British boxing dude. Like he's that guy.
They need to put him and Pac in a tag team together, and they can be like the British Hard Boys or something. It'd be.
I would just both beat the shit out of Kip Sabian. That also works.
But yeah, I think it makes sense for a go-go to go over. If Cody goes over, then they have to give a go-go a lot. But I suspect a go-go is going to go over.
Out of all I'm not enamored at all with the factory, but out of all of them, I would probably rather a go-go go over. I mean,
it makes the most sense, and he's the guy.
Especially the way they're building him up, right? I mean,
yeah. Well, he's the guy who has the most star power. Like when you look at him, when he's in his suit and he's talking about being an Olympian, and he's talking about how you guys here in America, and you screw over your populace and all of that, and you have a terrible health system, and you ruin people's lives, and he's got that star heel thing all over him, and he can probably transfer it to star babyface too without much trouble.
I just want to see how he wrestles. Like you can't just be.
But I want to see how he wrestles.
Yeah.
I mean, the punch they're doing a good job to get the punch over as a finisher, but we got to see how he wrestles.
Exactly. You can't just if you just come out with the one punch man type of stuff. That's fine, but that's not very entertaining for a lot of people.
I'll tell that to Braun Strowman or like any big guy who's ever been in the WWE ever. But but they do that. But they're much better about that here than they are at WWE.
Right. Okay, so I think that's all the mid-card matches, right? I
don't think anybody else had. I don't think there's any other feud things going on. I think that's it. So after
so if we move on to the titles, then we got the women's title, which we discussed. Pretty sure Dr. Britt Baker's going to.
If it's not Britt Baker, they've either done something really wrong or they have an unbelievable idea that
an incredibly specific plan in place.
It's got to be. It also feels like the reason she lost the Thunder Rosa match is because she was going to win the championship, and it has to be. It's her time. It has to be Britt Baker.
I feel like if she ends up losing, like even though she doesn't deserve it because she just seems like a nice person, she's been a fine champion or okay champion, good in the ring. But I just think you're gonna when a face wins, like if she has to end up winning, you're gonna hear all the air sucked out of the room basically whenever that happens, if that happens. But like we said, we're pretty sure.
Well, it's like with Moxley and Kingston and Moxley. Like, well, if it's not Britt Baker, then who is it? If they don't put it on her, who would they put? Who is there? There's nobody. There's nobody else except for Thunder Rosa, and they're not going to do that.
Right.
Not right.
Exactly. So we got that. Then the TNT title, Miro versus Lance Archer. Of course, Miro's going to go over. There's no way. In fact, out of all the matches that are on here, that's the one. I think it's the one we can easily say 100% he's going to win. Like, there's no doubt at all who's going to go over. You kind of feel bad for Lance because he's been put in this position a lot, where he just is set up to fail almost. But I mean, he still works as a monster heel, so there's still credibility. Like, it's still gonna be a tough match for Miro, sure. I'm interested to see what they do. Like, he's gonna try to do the blackout to him. Like, that'd be very big.
He did the blackout to Bear Bronson,
which
I was amazed. I was amazed he got him all the way over. I was like, wow.
Yeah. I mean, it wasn't Bear Boulder, but still.
That's not nothing.
I mean, that's not that's a big boy. That's yeah. So I mean, we can see with all certainty that Miro's going to win that one.
Well, it feels like it's also it sucks that he has to do the job again, but it's in some ways it's like the same position that like Brody Lee was in and some other guys where it's like, we trust you. You need to be in a main pay-per-view slot. Now, one of the side effects of you being in a main pay-per-view slot is there is as much a likelihood, or maybe even a greater likelihood of you losing as winning, because the cost of you being in a main pay-per-view slot is that you're going to have to lose because of just the way that's the way things are set up right now. You're going to have to lose to Darby Allin, or you're going to have to lose to John Moxley or something. But you know, there's a lot of guys on the card. They're not going to be in that main pay-per-view slot. They're just not. But
Right.
that Lance is, even if he's not winning, he's always going to be in one of those like co-main event slots or main pay-per-view slots or something. That, you know, and that says something. I know we've been talking about what's the point of the Ego Page or Scorpio Sky. That says a lot about Scorpio Sky too, that he's one of those guys there that like Darby Allin, Jungle Boy, MJF, Scorpio Sky, Brian Cage. They're like, these guys are the guys that they both draw, but we know the match quality is going to be there. They need to be in one of our precious few pay-per-view slots always, and they always are somewhere or another. Since they've been brought in there, they've been able to be in one of them. But yeah, it has to be Miro. It makes no sense for it to be anyone other than Miro.
Now, here's the thing. Do you think it's going to be like an extended feud, or do you think Lance is kind of like a transitional challenger and there's going to be something for that? Because I don't see anything on the horizon either.
I think, I mean, one of the good things about the TNT championship is that, and that everyone has done so far, is that it lends itself, and Miro's doing it too, is it lends itself to the open challenge. And so they're able to have like the main events for just
ranking to get to the title,
without necessarily having a feud. But also it makes sense for you know, because they're doing the title match so soon, and they're so soon between him and Lance without a chase, and so soon since Miro won, that it makes a lot of sense for it to be a feud, and they can feud through the summer, through Fighter Fest and Fight for the Fallen, and have, you know, maybe a second go round at All Out where the conclusion isn't necessarily preordained, and it could be good for a good feud. I guess it depends on what they have in mind.
Yeah, I'm okay. I'm ready for a feud. I think it would do wonders for Lance's character right now, actually, to be in a feud.
Well, Lance is you know, they keep him in, kind of what we're saying, like for better or for worse. He is a really good foil for whoever a champion is. So, because I can also see it being real easily going from, all right, he's lost to Miro. Now we're going to set him up to feud with Kenny for All Out, and he and Kenny would have a really good match, but he would probably lose that one too.
Right.
So, he's the perennial main event foil for pay-per-views and stuff. And
the bridesmaid, right? Never the bride.
So, I don't know. I don't know what they have in mind. You know, I guess it depends on if they're going to get to Adam Page now or later. If they decide to do Adam Page for All Out, which makes a lot of sense because that's the one where that's where he fought Chris Jericho and lost. So it makes a lot of, in his first ever world championship match and main event pay-per-view. So it makes a lot of sense for him to get to have redemption for that at an All Out again. I don't know, it makes sense to me. I don't know if that's what they're planning, but it makes sense to me. And if they do that, it also means it makes sense for them to run like Lance Archer and Miro again. Because who else is it going to be? Going to be Brian Cage and Miro? Is it going to be Jungle Boy and Miro?
I'd love to see that match. I think Brian Cage with Miro would be a fantastic match as far as like athleticism. Just two basically He-Man figures going at the ring at each other. I mean,
but they also leave belts on. They don't change belts very often. I mean, it's on average.
Oh, the Brian Cage is at the FCW belt, so there is that.
That's true. But you know, it's like, I think like 6 to 9. I think 9 months is like the average. Like most of the belts that they, like the women's championship is the one that has changed hands the most often. And even that, it's only been like 4 times in 2.5 years. So it doesn't happen that much, which is why it means something. It means a lot when one of them changes. Right.
I mean, do you remember back in the old days, it was like when they used to do the one-day championships all the time. I mean, this shit was tiring. It's like, okay, so the belt doesn't mean anything anymore, right?
They still do it. And even the companies that used to really protect their belts, like NJPW, don't do it as much. Still will change them a lot now. There's not
like transitional champions, that type of stuff. They still pull that type of thing.
They have been over the pandemic, partly because they've been forced to, because they've had a bunch of guys get hurt and not able to and have to take long leaves, and partly because they've tried some guys as champion, it didn't work, and they're like, all right, we got to get it off them. It's not working. But they as a side effect, they weaken the belt a lot. I mean, it happens. And then WWE just does that shit all the time. So
yeah, Miz, I think it's the latest example that I've heard.
It was awful for like a couple of weeks or something. It was terrible. It was awful.
So okay, so we got those in the tag match. I'm still, in the tag match, as much as it makes sense for me to see Mox and Eddie go over, and like we said, because who else is there. I still can see the Young Bucks retaining though.
Well,
I'm
here's the
not
other
as sold that the Mox and Eddie are going to go over.
The other thing that suddenly makes me think about that was we didn't mention from this episode. They had that really great Frankie Kazarian promo where he was talking about he was going to go and get the Bucks back for what they did to SC. They don't know what they've taken, but they're going to. So that makes sense as like a long, if the Bucks lose and then
Frankie
they
comes
can
back
have a long,
okay. But without Christopher Daniels, right? Because they're teasing retirement.
Well, no, because then he can have a separate one-on-one, which they do. They don't do it very often, but they do. The Bucks do occasionally do one-on-one matches. So then Frankie can come and have a series of one-on-one matches with the Bucks without the titles, and that gives the Bucks something to do in that big main event slot without having to be defending the titles or anything like that.
Because Frankie wrestled his ass off during that the last SCU Young Bucks match. I was so impressed with what Frankie did.
They both were really good. You can tell when things are really good when guys do intentional slips that the internet swears are botches, and you're like, that was not a botch. You did that. That was on purpose, and that's when like people are doing really good.
We're not all Matt Seidel.
He'll never live it down, but that's okay. It's all right. He has made up more than made up for that since then.
Right. Yeah. Sure.
They'll rib him about it forever, but still, I think he it was either on Elevation or it was on Dynamite. Maybe it was on Dynamite last week. Somebody was good. I guess maybe Christian.
Yeah, when they made fun of the debauch or the slipping that he did.
About the slipping. Yeah.
Oh, it was Christian. Christian made fun of
it. It was Christian. Yeah, Christian was making fun of him for falling down on his first move.
And he's like,
did you see the DTE where Michael Nakazawa oiled the pad down beforehand, and that's what caused him to slip?
What is that? What they said on BTE?
They did on BTE. They explained it. They showed Seidel and Michael Nakazawa having words. So Nakazawa decided to go and take his oil and oil the pad down.
Their creative damage control is kind of impressive sometimes. Right? When things go bad, they did a good job. Like even with the
they don't ignore it. They
don't
sit there and act like no, everything went exactly how we planned it. They're like,
it just made you look stupid. We'll
get out of it. So we'll find our way out of it.
And just like the Orange Cassidy match too, when they had the thing when he went down, was supposed to originally be a 20-minute timeout, right? Yeah, I think that was the original plan for that. But then when he went in,
got to where they wanted to go.
Call Don Callis and have him come to the ring.
They had to do it on the fly, but they did. And that's really hard. Yeah. So I still think that makes me think more than ever that Moxley and Kingston are going over. If they don't, then they've got like a really good idea and plan for the future that I just can't guess at. But I think it's going to be Moxley and Kingston. That might end up being like the quote unquote upset of the night. But that's one of those ones where the people involved are at basically the same level on the depth chart. And the Reigns, but like I didn't think there was any chance that Jericho was going to beat the Young Bucks. Jericho and MJF were going to beat the Young Bucks because it didn't fit with how long they had the titles and what else was in the feuds they were in. But this fits on every side. It makes a lot of sense to do it.
We did forget that. Inner Circle Pinnacle.
No, I haven't forgot because that's
going to go over in that one. I'm thinking Inner Circle is for the law.
I think it would be the Inner Circle. I think the only reason you have them lose Blood and Guts is because they're going to win Stadium Stampede. That's the only reason to do it. If they lose Stadium Stampede, they better have an amazing idea for a follow-up.
Right, exactly. I think that's another one where you can basically book them as winning that one. I mean, that's just. Yeah. I mean, otherwise, that story doesn't really make sense if they don't win this one.
Yeah. There's nothing I'm like really. There's nothing I'm. Usually AEW does what makes sense. There's nothing in here where anything doesn't. The only thing that would be a real surprise is who they might pick for Battle Royal, because there's so many people in there, and I can't even begin to guess. Like the one I would most likely give it to would be Jungle Boy, but
but who knows? It just depends on who they want to push for a little bit.
They could easily give it to Christian Cage so they can jump right to the Christian Cage Kenny Omega championship match, which is what they did with Brian Cage. So they were able to have that right away just as soon as he joined.
That's right.
They could easily do that with Christian Cage. And I've been surprised because I didn't think Scorpio Sky was going to win that Face of the Revolution match at Revolution. And then he did, because he's lost so many of those. And then he did. So,
and turned heel. I mean, that was the whole point, right?
So, it would be real easy to do that.
Yeah, so definitely, and we're thinking Inner Circle is going to go over Pinnacle on that one.
For sure.
So here's another thing I was going to bring up. It ties back to the Mox and Eddie thing, because when we talk about the World Championship match, when you had Kenny versus Pac and OC, Orange Cassidy, as much as I love Pac and Orange Cassidy, I think we all know Kenny's going to be.
Kenny's going to win. Yeah.
And here's another thing. So then you have, if you have Britt winning, and then you have Kenny winning, and you have Miro retaining, that's 3 heels already.
That's true.
As championships. So when you have Mox and Eddie, that could be the one.
At least you get one. You're like, what is this, WrestleMania? We're all heel champions.
Although there is something to be said for the story of chasing the heel champion, but is this that every belt that's going to be the story? That's kind of like, okay, a little repetitive.
Well, it only works when you have actual baby faces to chase the heel. But yeah, that makes more sense. At least you have one baby face belt champion, so you can have some who can fight the heels. So while everybody else is, you don't want everyone being baby faces too, especially because I mean the reality is for the most part the top 2 belts are the World Championship and the tag belts. I mean those tend to be the ones in the best main events, and then the TNT and the women's, it varies. There's a lot of variability. So it also makes sense that if you're going to have, I think they've done this most of the time. If you have a heel world champion, you're going to have babyface tag champions. And if you have heel tag champions, you're going to have a babyface.
Yeah, I guess in this instance, it's their faction, right? So that was kind of the whole story. Was that all the
like
chasing that TNT title.
Like when Jericho was champion, you had faces as tag teams. You had SCU and Omega and Page, so you had baby faces as the tag champions. And then when Moxley was champion, you had Page and Omega, but that was just because nobody was wrestling at all, and the pandemic closed everything down. But then they switched it to FTR, and you had FTR as heel champions. And I think they probably would have, if it hadn't been for some of the stuff with the pandemic, they would have had FTR as heel champions longer. But then
they deserved a longer run. Yeah,
they switched to the Bucks. I think they switched to the Bucks pretty quick because they also knew that in December, because they switched to the Bucks in November because they knew in December they were going to be switching to a heel world champion with Kenny. And now that the Bucks have turned heel, they got to get it off. And Kenny's going to stay champion for probably at least through the summer. They got to have some babyface tag champions. Especially if you have a heel.
It's a pretty safe call for us. Is that basically you're gonna have 3 heel champions after this, and then it's gonna be 1 babyface team, which is probably gonna be Mox and Eddie. So we'll see. I mean, anything can happen at these type of shows, right? So
I'm trying to think if they've ever had more than 2 belts change in a show, because I think what we're saying is like world champion and TNT champion are going to retain, but women and tag champions are going to switch. And I don't think I'm pretty sure they've never had 3 belts switch. Like Double or Nothing last year was the first TNT winner, but then all the others retained. Hangman Page. Well, no, they didn't have a tag match. They didn't have a tag championship match because they had Stadium Stampede. So there was no no tag match at Double or Nothing last year. And world champion, and that's where women's champion changed, world champion retained, and you crowned the first TNT champion. And there was no. The Double or Nothing last year was just like an oddity that doesn't count for anything.
It was kind of like, it's basically like
you can't compare it to anything. All Out tag belts changed, world championship belt retained, TNT belt retained, and tag belt retained. So there was only one. There was no title change. There was no title change at all. No, there was one title change. The tag belt changed. So there was one title change at All Out. That's about par for the course. Full Gear, TNT championship changed, and tag championship changed, but women's and men's retained. So you had
2 and 2. Yeah, which makes the most sense, you would think, right? I mean, as far as parity goes.
Yep. And at Revolution this past year, men's retained, women's retained, TNT retained, and no, TNT wasn't defended, and tag retained.
Right? Yeah.
I can't remember who the Young Bucks faced.
I don't know, like Jungle Express or something. I don't think it was like.
I don't think it was. I think it was higher up than that.
Okay.
I can't remember. Oh, it was
right now.
it was Jericho and MJF. That's who it was. That's who
Best friends,
they
maybe? No, I don't know.
no, it was no best. No, they've never Young Bucks have never wrestled best friends. Strangely.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
It was against Jericho and MJF versus Young Bucks. And
oh, that's right. That's right. That's
and
before they were really fully heel or anything.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it was the start. It was the start of the Inner Circle falling apart, with them losing that match. Those two stories. So all the defended championships retained, and then they didn't defend the TNT championship, which I guess they don't always defend the TNT championship because they did.
I mean, now that Miro's the champion, they should probably.
Yeah. Well, it seems to depend on what they were doing, because they had Darby and Sting versus Team Taz, and so they just didn't do it. So I mean, if they're gonna have. Yeah, 2 makes sense. They've switched 2 before, and it makes sense for them to switch 2. I don't think they have ever had every belt. I'm trying to think. Well, they have. In the days of 3 belts, they've had every belt, because at Revolution of 2020, men's championship switched, because the women's champion retained and the tag team retained, but Moxley beat Jericho, so the men's championship switched. At Full Gear, men's championship. I guess that was the only one. At Full Gear, men's championship retained, tag team retained, and that was either where they crowned the first women's champion. I think it was a women's match against Simi Sakura, and Rio retained. That was it. That was the only one where there no belt switched, because a lot of them, because it happened because it was their first pay-per-view after Dynamite started, and almost every case, people had just gotten their belts for the first time like a week before because I think like SCU had their belts for like a week, and Rio had her belt for like 2 weeks. So so they couldn't switch. They couldn't switch anything.
Yeah, that'd be really weird to have a title switch like in the first 2 pay-per-views that you have in your company. You need to establish some type of credibility with titles, right? And champions, for that matter.
So I think it makes a lot of sense, especially if we consider that Britt Baker is definitely going to win the women. If Britt Baker doesn't win the women's match, then Moxley and Kingston are going to go over, because there's no way that they would have all 4 belts not retain. I can't say
like it was going to be 4 retaining, right? It's like that's not gonna happen.
If they're so like, and I don't know what order they're going to go in, because sometimes the Bucks like to go real early and sometimes they like to go real late. It seems like if they think they're going to have a great match, they like to go first, and if they think
I have to say AEW usually like to start off with some barn burners. So
well, usually they usually start with the casino, but I don't know. I think one year they did the casino battle royale in the middle. Usually they like to do it first and just get it out of the way. It's like if the Young Bucks lose to Moxley and Omega, there's still like a better than average chance that Britt's going over. If the Young Bucks retain, Britt's definitely going over. If Britt loses, then Moxley and Kingston are definitely going over. And if Britt wins, there's still a better than average chance that Moxley and Kingston are going over. I think that people are going to be right. The surprise upset of the show is going to be the Young Bucks losing, but we'll see.
Well, you see, when you have 2 of us there, there's a 33 1/3% chance of doing it. To bring back Steiner.
Hey, that's what we're talking about. We're talking about AEW analytics or whatever it was you came up with. We've also been recording for almost 3 hours, so I don't know how we're going to get down to a single show.
What was that?
So I don't know how we're going to get this down to a single show.
Yeah, we could talk this fucking ever, dude.
We'll just have to cut it off at some point.
Yeah, well, I think we're about at that point now because we've run over the whole card already. And so I guess the next show we should do is probably on the Monday after the pay-per-view.
Yeah.
And see where things ended up, basically.
Tons of stuff. We'll see how many we were right about. I think we both agree, because I think we both agree on Moxley and Kingston now. So I think we both agree on who's going over on every match. So we'll see what happens.
Yep, we'll see what happens.